When Elena Carter stepped onto that rain-soaked Manhattan crosswalk, she thought she'd escaped her past. But the black convoy that screeched to a halt against the red light shattered that illusion in seconds. Victor Romano, the ruthless crime boss who once owned her heart and nearly destroyed her soul, emerged from the SUV, his dark eyes locking onto hers across 4 lanes of traffic. The wind pressed her coat tight against her body, and in that single, devastating moment, he saw everything. The curve of her belly, the secret she'd been hiding, the truth that would chain them together forever. She was 6 months pregnant with his child. Before we dive into this story of power, obsession, and the thin line between love and possession, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin where everything fell apart and where it might just come back together. The rain had started 3 blocks ago, light at first, then gradually building into the kind of downpour that turned Manhattan streets into rivers and sent pedestrians scrambling for cover. Elena Carter stood beneath the drugstore awning on the corner of Lexington and 53rd, watching the deluge and trying to convince herself that this was just weather, just water, just another February storm in a city that had seen thousands of them. But nothing felt simple anymore. Nothing felt safe. She adjusted the grocery bag in her arms, conscious of the way it partially obscured her midsection, a habit she'd developed over the past month as her body had begun to betray her secret. At 24 weeks, she could no longer pretend the changes were subtle. The pharmacist inside had noticed, his eyes dropping briefly to her belly, before offering her a kind smile as he handed over the prenatal vitamins. Each interaction like that sent a spike of anxiety through her chest. Someone would notice. Someone would tell him. Someone would destroy the fragile new life she'd built. "Miss, you waiting for someone?" The drugstore security guard stood in the doorway, his tone gentle but questioning. "We're closing in 5 minutes." Elena shook her head. "No, I'm just waiting for the rain to let up. Doesn't look like it's planning to." He glanced at the sky, then back at her with concern. "You got far to go?" "Just to the subway." She forced a smile. "I'll be fine." But she wasn't fine. She hadn't been fine since the day she'd packed a single suitcase, withdrawn $2,000 from the account Victor didn't monitor, and disappeared into the sprawling anonymity of Brooklyn. 6 months of looking over her shoulder. 6 months of jumping at shadows. 6 months of building a life so quiet, so unremarkable, that no one would ever think to look for her there. And now she was carrying proof of everything she'd left behind. The security guard retreated inside, and Elena stepped out from under the awning. The rain hit her immediately, cold and sharp, soaking through her jacket within seconds. She pulled her coat tighter, a useless gesture that only emphasized what she was trying to hide, and started across Lexington toward the subway entrance. The crosswalk signal blinked white. She stepped off the curb. Halfway across the intersection, tires squealed against wet asphalt. Elena's head snapped up. A convoy of 3 black SUVs had blown through the red light, stopping in a perfect formation that blocked all 4 lanes of cross traffic. Horns blared. A taxi driver leaned out his window, shouting obscenities. But the SUVs didn't move. They just sat there, engines idling, dark and imposing as storm clouds. Elena froze in the middle of the crosswalk. Something cold and familiar slithered down her spine. She knew these vehicles. She knew what they meant. She'd spent 18 months learning to recognize the signs of his presence, the way prey learns to sense a predator. The rear door of the center SUV opened. A man stepped out into the rain. Victor Romano. Elena's breath stopped. The grocery bag slipped from her fingers, cans of soup and boxes of crackers spilling across the wet pavement. She couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but stare as the man she'd fled, the man she'd loved and feared in equal measure, stood 20 feet away and looked directly at her. He wore a charcoal suit, perfectly tailored, the rain darkening his shoulders and slicking his black hair back from his face. At 36, Victor Romano commanded every room he entered with the kind of authority that didn't require violence, though everyone knew he was capable of it. His family controlled half the construction contracts in New York. Three-quarters of the shipping that came through Newark and countless other enterprises that existed in the gray spaces between legal and criminal. He was powerful, he was dangerous, and once she'd believed he loved her. Victor's dark eyes found hers across the distance. For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain poured down. Traffic roared around them. The city continued its chaotic symphony, but in that narrow corridor of space between them, everything went silent. Then the wind gusted, pressing Elena's wet coat flat against her body. The fabric molded to the unmistakable curve of her belly, 6 months of secret pregnancy suddenly visible, undeniable. Victor's expression didn't change. His face remained perfectly controlled, that mask of calm authority he wore like armor. But Elena saw his hands curl into fists at his sides, saw the muscle jump in his jaw, saw the flash of something, shock, rage, possessiveness, flicker through his eyes before he locked it down. He knew. Panic flooded Elena's system like ice water. She bent down, scrambling to gather the scattered groceries with shaking hands. A can rolled toward the gutter. She lunged for it, her movements clumsy and desperate. Behind her, she heard a car door open, the heavy thud of boots on wet pavement. "Elena!" His voice cut through the rain, deep and commanding. The same voice that had whispered endearments in the dark and issued orders that men died for. Hearing it again after 6 months sent a visceral shock through her entire body. She grabbed the last can, shoved it in the bag, and ran. "Elena, stop!" But she was already sprinting toward the opposite sidewalk, her coat flapping behind her, the grocery bag clutched against her chest. Her boots splashed through puddles, her heart hammered against her ribs. Behind her she heard Victor shout something in Italian, a command to his men, and then the sound of running footsteps. Elena hit the sidewalk and didn't slow down. She knew this neighborhood, had studied it during her months of hiding, mapping escape routes the way other people planned commutes. She ducked into a narrow alley between a dry cleaner and a bodega, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The alley was dark, slick with rain, garbage bags piled against one wall. She pushed past them, emerging onto a side street and kept running. A black SUV screeched around the corner ahead of her. Elena skidded to a stop, reversed direction, and plunged into the stream of pedestrians on the main avenue. She used the crowd as cover, moving fast but trying not to draw attention, just another person hurrying through the rain. At the next intersection, she spotted the green globe of a subway entrance and made for it, taking the stairs down 2 at a time. The underground station was crowded with commuters escaping the storm. Elena wove between them, digging in her pocket for her MetroCard. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely swipe it. The turnstile clicked. She pushed through and ran for the platform just as a downtown express train pulled in. The doors opened. Elena squeezed inside. The car was packed, bodies pressed together in the humid underground air. She pushed toward the center, putting as many people as possible between herself and the doors. Through the window, she scanned the platform, searching for any sign of Victor's men. Nothing. Just commuters. Just strangers. Just... A figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with predatory grace. Marco Santini, Victor's head of security, the man who'd been present at every family dinner, every business meeting, every moment of her 18 months with Victor. He scanned the platform with professional efficiency, his gaze sweeping across the crowd. Elena pressed herself behind a large man in a construction vest, making herself small. The subway doors beeped their warning. Marco's head turned toward the sound. For one horrible second, his eyes seemed to look directly at the window where Elena stood frozen. The doors slid shut. The train lurched forward, and Elena watched Marco Santini disappear as the subway pulled out of the station, carrying her into the dark tunnels beneath the city. She sagged against the pole, her legs suddenly weak, her whole body trembling. The other passengers ignored her, lost in their phones and their own thoughts. No one noticed the pregnant woman trying not to cry. No one cared about the private catastrophe unfolding in their midst. Elena closed her eyes and tried to breathe, tried to think, tried to figure out what the hell she was going to do now that Victor knew. The train rattled through the darkness, and with each passing second, one truth became more and more clear. Running had only bought her 6 months. Her past had finally caught up with her. And this time, she had so much more to lose. Elena's apartment was in Sunset Park, a third-floor walk-up in a building that had seen better decades. The neighborhood was working class, diverse, anonymous, exactly what she'd needed when she'd fled Victor's penthouse in Tribeca. Here, no one asked questions. No one cared who you were or where you'd come from. You paid your rent, you kept your head down, and you were left alone. She'd thought she was safe here. She'd been wrong. Elena climbed the stairs slowly, her body aching with exhaustion and fear. The grocery bag had torn somewhere on the subway, and she'd lost half its contents. She'd have to go out again tomorrow. The thought made her want to cry. At her door, she stopped, key halfway to the lock. Every instinct screamed at her to check over her shoulder, to make sure she hadn't been followed, but she forced herself to stay calm. Victor's men were good, but they weren't omniscient. She'd been careful. She'd taken 3 different trains, doubled back twice, emerged from a different station entirely. No one could have tracked her through that. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was small, just a studio with a bathroom and a kitchen alcove that barely deserved the name, but it was hers. She'd paid the deposit with cash, signed the lease with a name that wasn't quite fake, but wasn't quite real either. Elena Carter. Not Elena Rossi, the name she'd used when she was with Victor. Not Elena Marchetti, her maiden name. Something in between. Something that let her pretend she could be someone else. She locked the door behind her, deadbolt, chain, the additional lock she'd installed herself, and finally let herself collapse. She sank onto the second-hand couch, still wearing her wet coat, and let the tears come. 6 months. She'd made it 6 months. She'd found a job doing remote bookkeeping for small businesses, work that kept her off the grid and let her save money. She'd found an obstetrician who accepted cash payments and didn't ask too many questions. She'd built a life, fragile and small, but a life nonetheless. And Victor had destroyed it in 30 seconds, just by looking at her across a rain-soaked street. Elena's hand moved to her belly, resting on the curve that had betrayed her. Inside, she felt the flutter of movement, stronger now at 24 weeks, more insistent. The babies. Because it wasn't just one. The ultrasound at 16 weeks had revealed the truth. Identical twins. 2 daughters, the technician had told her with a smile. 2 little girls. She'd cried then too. But those had been different tears. Complicated tears. She'd left Victor because staying had been slowly killing her, because his world was built on violence and control, because she'd needed to breathe and he'd been suffocating her. But she'd also left carrying pieces of him inside her, literal parts of their shared past that she couldn't escape no matter how far she ran. And now he knew. Elena pulled out her phone, an untraceable burner she'd bought at a convenience store in Queens. She had 3 contacts saved, her obstetrician, her landlord, and Sarah. Sarah Chen, her only friend from before, the only person who knew both versions of her life. They'd met in college, bonded over late-night study sessions, and a shared love of old movies. Sarah had been the one to help her leave, to give her cash and a place to stay for those first terrifying weeks. Sarah had been the one to tell her the truth she hadn't wanted to hear. That Victor Romano would never let her go. That men like him didn't lose what they considered theirs. The phone rang twice before Sarah answered. Elena, what's wrong? Even after 6 months, Sarah could still read her voice, could hear the panic. Elena's throat tightened. He saw me, Victor. He saw me, and he... Sarah, he knows. Silence. Then, where are you? Home, my apartment. I lost them. I made sure... It doesn't matter. Sarah's voice was sharp with fear. If he knows you're pregnant, he'll tear this city apart to find you. You need to leave. Now. Tonight. Leave and go where? Elena's voice broke. I have $200 in cash. I can't travel like this. I can't. Then you need to call him. What? You need to call Victor and tell him the truth before he finds out on his own. Sarah paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. Elena, running made sense 6 months ago when you were alone. But you're not alone anymore. And if Victor finds you before you talk to him, if he thinks you've been hiding his children... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They both knew what Victor Romano was capable of when someone took what was his. Elena closed her eyes. I can't go back to that life. Maybe you don't have to. Maybe if you're honest with him, if you set boundaries, Victor doesn't do boundaries. He does possession. The words came out bitter, edged with old pain. That's all I ever was to him. a thing he owned. Then tell him that. Sarah's voice turned fierce. Tell him everything. Tell him why you left, what you need, what you're afraid of. Make him hear you, because the alternative is letting him write the narrative, and we both know how that ends. Elena opened her eyes, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her tiny apartment. Sarah was right. She'd known it from the moment Victor's eyes had locked onto hers across that intersection. There was no running from this, no hiding. The only path forward was through. Okay, she whispered. Okay, I'll figure something out. Do it soon, please. Sarah paused. And Elena? Whatever happens, I'm here. You're not alone. They said goodbye, and Elena set the phone down on the couch beside her. Her hand found her belly again, tracing the curve where her daughters grew. She thought about the man she'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, the one who'd made her laugh, who'd shown her a world of art galleries and private concerts, who'd looked at her like she was the only thing in the universe that mattered. Then she thought about the man that version of Victor had become. Or maybe the man he'd always been underneath. The one whose business associates disappeared. The one whose anger was a physical force. The one who'd loved her like a hurricane, all-consuming and destructive, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Which Victor would she get if she reached out to him? Which version of the man she'd loved and fled would show up at her door? Elena didn't know, but Sarah was right about one thing. She was going to find out, one way or another. Better to control the terms of that meeting than to wait for Victor to control them for her. She pulled herself off the couch and walked to the window. Rain still fell, blurring the lights of Brooklyn into watercolor smears. Somewhere out there in the city, Victor was searching for her, mobilizing resources, calling in favors, using every tool at his disposal to find the woman who disappeared 6 months ago and reappeared pregnant with his children. Elena pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would figure out how to contact him. Tonight, she just needed to survive the fear. Behind her, someone knocked on the door. Elena spun around, her heart lurching. Who is it? No answer. Just another knock, heavier this time, insistent. I said, who is it? Her voice came out shakier now. She moved toward the door, staying to the side, out of the line of sight from the peephole. If you don't answer, I'm calling the police. A pause. Then a voice muffled through the wood. Mrs. Romano, please open the door. Mrs. Romano, a name she'd carried for exactly 5 months before she'd left. They'd married in a small ceremony, small by Romano family standards anyway, which still meant 200 guests and a reception that cost more than most people's houses. Victor had insisted on it, had wanted the world to know she belonged to him. She'd said yes because she'd loved him, because she'd thought marriage meant partnership, meant building something together. She'd learned the truth quickly enough. I don't go by that name, Elena called through the door, even as her hand shook. You have the wrong apartment. Please, Mrs. The voice corrected itself. Miss Carter. Mr. Romano sent me to ensure your safety. He's very concerned. He just wants to talk. Elena's mind raced. They'd found her in less than 4 hours. 4 hours. She'd underestimated him, underestimated his reach, his resources, his absolute refusal to accept limits of any kind. Tell Mr. Romano that if he wants to talk, he can call like a normal person. He's here. The words sent ice through Elena's veins. What? Mr. Romano is downstairs in his car. He's respectfully requesting a few moments of your time. He asks that you not make this difficult. Not make this difficult, as if she were the problem, as if she were being unreasonable by wanting privacy, by wanting control over when and how she faced the man she'd fled. Elena looked around her apartment, this small space that had been her sanctuary, and felt the walls closing in. She could refuse. She could call the police. But what would she tell them? That her ex-husband wanted to talk to her? That wasn't a crime. And Victor had half the NYPD on his payroll anyway. Any cops who showed up would take one look at the situation and politely suggest she have a conversation with Mr. Romano. She was trapped. She'd been trapped from the moment he'd seen her on that crosswalk. I need a minute, she called through the door. Of course. Mr. Romano is a patient man. That was a lie. Victor Romano was many things. Brilliant, ruthless, magnetic, but patient wasn't one of them. If he was waiting in the car instead of breaking down her door, it meant he was trying to be reasonable, trying to give her the illusion of choice. Elena walked to her bedroom, just a corner of the studio sectioned off by a bookshelf, and looked at herself in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her hair was still wet from the rain, hanging in dark tangles around her face. Her coat had dried into wrinkled creases. Her eyes were red from crying. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman at the end of her rope. She thought about changing, about trying to look composed. But what was the point? Victor had already seen the truth written on her body. There was no hiding now. Elena returned to the door and opened it. In the hallway stood Marco Santini and another man she recognized, Paolo, one of Victor's drivers. Both wore dark suits and carefully neutral expressions. Marco was in his 40s, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen too much and learned to show nothing. He'd always been polite to her, in that distant way of men who worked in violence. "Miss Carter." Marco inclined his head respectfully. "Thank you. Mr. Romano is waiting." She wanted to tell them she wasn't going anywhere, wanted to slam the door and pretend this wasn't happening. Instead, she heard herself say, "I need to get my coat." She retrieved it from where she'd thrown it over a chair, pulled it on, and stepped into the hallway. Marco and Paolo fell into step on either side of her, not touching, not crowding, but making it clear that running was no longer an option. They descended the stairs in silence. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the streets slick and reflecting the amber glow of streetlights. A black SUV idled at the curb, its engine purring. Marco moved ahead and opened the rear door. Elena hesitated at the threshold, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Miss Carter," Marco said gently, "he's just going to talk, that's all." Just going to talk, right. Because Victor Romano was known for his restraint. Elena ducked her head and climbed into the SUV. The interior was all black leather and tinted windows, warm despite the February cold outside. And sitting in the far seat, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read, was Victor. He'd changed out of the suit from earlier. Now he wore dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that made his eyes look almost black. His hair had dried, falling across his forehead in a way that made him look younger, more like the man she'd fallen in love with. But there was nothing young about the intensity in his gaze, the controlled tension in his posture. Marco closed the door. The sound of it latching felt final, like a cell door closing. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out, heavy with everything unsaid, everything broken between them. Elena pressed herself against the door, maintaining as much distance as the space allowed. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly, protective. Victor's eyes tracked the movement. His jaw tightened. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, barely controlled. "How far along?" Elena's throat felt like sandpaper. 24 weeks. 6 months. He did the math quickly, his expression darkening. "You were pregnant when you left." "I didn't know then." The words came out defensive. "I found out 2 weeks later." "And you didn't think I deserved to know?" "I didn't think a lot of things, Victor." Her voice cracked. "I didn't think you'd find me. I didn't think I could hide a pregnancy forever. I didn't think—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "I was trying to figure it out." "Figure it out?" He repeated the words like they were foreign. "You were going to figure out what to do about my child without telling me I had a child?" "Children." The words slipped out before she could stop it. "Twins. Girls." The impact of that statement was visible. Victor's face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, something that looked almost like pain, before settling back into that controlled mask. But his hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists. "Twins," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Daughters." Elena watched him wrestle with the information, saw the wheels turning behind his eyes. This was Victor at his most dangerous, not when he was angry, but when he was thinking, calculating, planning his next move. "I want to be clear about something," he said finally, his voice dropping into that tone of absolute authority she remembered too well. "Those children are mine. You are—" He stopped himself, reconsidered his words. "We need to discuss how this is going to work." "There's nothing to discuss." Elena forced steel into her voice. even though her whole body was shaking. I left for a reason, Victor. Your world, your life. It's not safe for children. It's not safe for me. My world? His eyes flashed. 6 months ago, you lived in my world just fine. You didn't seem to mind the safety, the comfort, the life I provided. I minded being a prisoner. The words burst out of her, carried on 6 months of suppressed anger and fear. I minded being watched every second. I minded having my every decision controlled. I minded being treated like a possession instead of a person. I protected you. You suffocated me. The explosion of her voice seemed to fill the SUV. Victor stared at her, and for a moment she saw something like hurt cross his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. I loved you, he said, each word precise and cutting. Everything I did was because I loved you. Your kind of love almost destroyed me. Elena's voice shook, but she didn't back down. Do you have any idea what it was like? Living in that penthouse, surrounded by guards, monitored everywhere I went? You said it was for my protection, but it was really just control. Your control. And I tried, Victor. I tried to talk to you, to tell you I needed space, needed freedom, but you never listened. You just... Her voice broke. You just kept tightening the grip until I couldn't breathe. Silence fell between them, sharp and painful. Outside, through the tinted windows, Elena could see her building, the lit windows of her neighbors' apartments. Normal lives. Simple lives. Everything she'd been trying to build. Is that really what you think? Victor's voice was quiet now, dangerous in its restraint. That I didn't love you? That everything I did was about control? I think your love and your need to control are so tangled up you can't tell them apart anymore. Elena met his eyes. I think you loved me the way you love everything else, by owning it completely. Victor flinched. It was subtle, just a slight tightening around his eyes, but Elena saw it. She'd hurt him. The realization brought no satisfaction, only a deep, bone-tired sadness. So what now? Victor asked. You're just going to raise my daughters alone? Keep them from me? Pretend I don't exist? I don't know. Elena's hand moved to her belly again, to the place where their children grew. I don't know what I'm going to do, Victor. All I know is that I can't go back to how things were. I won't. Then we'll change how things are. He leaned forward, his intensity sharpening. Elena, I'm not going to pretend the last 6 months didn't happen. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you think of me. But those are my children, mine, and I will be part of their lives. The only question is whether we do this the easy way or the hard way. Is that a threat? It's a fact. His voice was granite. You know what I'm capable of. You know the resources I have. I could take you to court. I could tie you up in legal battles for years. I could make your life very, very difficult. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice softened just slightly. Or we could find a way to work together. For them. Elena stared at him, at the man she'd loved and feared, and felt the trap closing around her. He was right, and they both knew it. Victor Romano didn't make idle threats. If she fought him, he would bury her. If she ran, he would find her. The only option left was negotiation. I want things in writing, she said. Legal agreements, boundaries, rules. Fine. I want my own place. Not with you. Not controlled by you. His jaw tightened, but he nodded. Acceptable. I want to be part of decisions about their lives. Real partnership, Victor. Not you dictating and me obeying. Agreed. The word came out strained, like it physically hurt him to say it. And I want... Elena hesitated, trying to find words for the thing she needed most. I want to be able to leave. If things get bad again, if you start trying to control me again, I want the freedom to walk away. And I want you to promise you won't stop me. That request hung in the air between them. Victor's face was unreadable, but she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Everything in him, every possessive instinct, every need for control fought against giving her that freedom. Finally, he spoke. I can't promise that. Then we have a problem. Elena? No. She cut him off, her voice firm, despite the tears threatening to spill. You say you've changed. You say we can work together? Then prove it. Give me what I'm asking for. Let me have agency over my own life. The silence stretched out. Through the windshield, Elena could see Marco and Paolo standing a discreet distance away, giving them privacy while remaining close enough to respond if needed. The rain had picked up again, tapping against the roof of the SUV like impatient fingers. "I'll try," Victor said finally. "That's the best I can offer. I'll try to respect your boundaries. I'll try to give you freedom, but I can't promise I won't fight to keep you if you try to leave again. I can't promise I won't do everything in my power to make you stay." It wasn't what she'd asked for. It wasn't enough. But looking at Victor's face, at the raw honesty there, Elena realized it might be all he was capable of giving. He was a man built on control, on power, on the absolute conviction that he could bend the world to his will. Asking him to simply let her go was like asking him to stop breathing. "Then I'll try too," she whispered. "I'll try to trust you, to believe you can change. But Victor, if you start down that same path, if you start trying to cage me again, you'll leave." He finished the sentence for her. "I know. And you should know that I'll come after you, not because I want to control you, but because I—" He stopped, swallowed. "Because the thought of losing you again almost killed me the first time." The confession hung between them, raw and painful. Elena wanted to reach for him, to comfort the hurt she heard in his voice, but she couldn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Too much damage had been done. Too much trust had been broken. "We should get you home," Victor said, his voice returning to that careful neutrality. "It's late. You need to rest." "I am home." Elena gestured toward her building. "This is where I live." Victor glanced at the structure, taking in the weathered brick, the flickering light in the entranceway, the general air of managed decay. His expression said everything about what he thought of his children growing up in a place like this. "We'll talk tomorrow," he said, "about living arrangements, medical care, everything. I'll have my lawyer draw up an agreement, something that protects both of us." Elena nodded, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had been keeping her upright was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. "Okay, tomorrow." She reached for the door handle, but Victor's voice stopped her. "Elena." She turned back. In the dim light of the SUV, his face was all shadows and angles, beautiful and harsh in equal measure. The face that had haunted her dreams for 6 months. "I know you don't believe me," he said quietly, "but I am glad you're safe. Both of you. All of you." His eyes dropped to her belly, then back to her face. "Whatever happens next, whatever we become to each other, I need you to know that." Elena's throat tightened. She couldn't speak, couldn't trust her voice not to break. So she just nodded and pushed open the door, stepping out into the cold February drizzle. Marco appeared immediately with an umbrella, walking her to the building entrance. "Mr. Romano has asked me to post men nearby," he said as they reached the door. "For your safety. I don't need guards. With respect, Miss Carter, you're carrying the Romano heirs. You absolutely need guards." His voice was kind but firm. "They'll be discreet. You won't even know they're there." It was starting already, the protection that felt like control, the safety that felt like imprisonment. Elena wanted to argue, to refuse, but she was too tired and too scared to fight this battle tonight. Tomorrow. She would draw her lines in the sand tomorrow. "Fine," she said, "but they stay outside." Of course. Elena climbed the stairs to her apartment alone, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Inside, with all 3 locks engaged, she finally let herself collapse. She didn't make it to the bed. She just slid down the door and sat on the floor, her hand on her belly, and cried. For the life she'd tried to build, for the future she'd imagined, for the impossible situation she found herself in, tied forever to a man who loved her in all the wrong ways, and for her daughters, who would be born into this complicated, dangerous world, whether she wanted it or not. Outside, 3 floors below, Victor sat in his SUV and stared at the building that held everything he'd thought he'd lost. In 6 months, he'd torn the city apart looking for her. He'd used every resource, called in every favor, threatened and bribed and manipulated. And in the end, she'd just appeared, like a ghost materializing on a rain-soaked crosswalk, carrying his children, twins, daughters. The knowledge sat in his chest like something alive, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. He'd never imagined himself as a father. His life didn't leave room for that kind of vulnerability, that kind of weakness. Children were leverage, were targets, were liabilities in his world, but they were also his. And nothing, not Elena's fear, not her resistance, not the impossible distance between what he was and what she needed him to be, would stop him from claiming what was his. Marco appeared at the window. Victor rolled it down. "She's inside," Marco reported. "I've positioned 2 men in the building across the street and 1 on the corner. We'll rotate shifts every 6 hours." "Good. No one gets near her. No one even looks at that building without us knowing about it." "Understood." Marco hesitated. "Sir, if I may, she's afraid of you." "I know." "If you push too hard—" "I know, Marco." Victor's voice sharpened. "I'm aware of the situation. I'm aware of what I stand to lose." Marco nodded and stepped back. The window rolled up. In the silence of the SUV, Victor allowed himself one moment of weakness, one moment where he wasn't the ruthless head of the Romano family, wasn't the man who controlled an empire built on violence and fear. In that moment, he was just a man who'd lost the woman he loved and just found out he was about to be a father. His hand moved to his chest, pressing against the place where his heart beat too fast, where something that felt dangerously like hope was beginning to bloom. Tomorrow, he would start fixing this. Tomorrow, he would show Elena he could change, could be what she needed. Tomorrow, he would begin building a future that could hold all of them, him, Elena, and the 2 daughters who didn't yet know how completely they'd already changed everything. But tonight, he just sat in the rain and the dark, looking up at the window where a single light burned, and tried to figure out how to love someone without destroying them in the process. It was, he thought, going to be the hardest thing he'd ever done. And Victor Romano had never walked away from a challenge in his life. The morning came too quickly, pale winter light filtering through the thin curtains of Elena's apartment. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning through scenarios and conversations, each one ending badly. At some point near dawn, she'd felt the twins moving, their kicks gentle but insistent, as if reminding her that this wasn't just about her anymore. Everything she did now, every choice she made, would shape their lives. She was making coffee, decaf, a concession to pregnancy she resented every morning, when her phone buzzed. Not the burner. Her old phone, the one she'd kept turned off in a drawer for 6 months, too afraid to power it on because she knew Victor could track it. Somehow, impossibly, it was on now, plugged into a charger she hadn't put there, fully charged and displaying a single text message from a number she'd never forgotten. "My lawyer will be at your apartment at 10 a.m. Her name is Catherine Wright. She's worked with difficult negotiations before. She'll be fair." Elena stared at the message, her hand shaking. He'd been in her apartment. While she slept, while she was vulnerable and unaware, Victor's people had entered her home, plugged in her phone, and left. The violation of it made her stomach turn. But underneath the anger was something else. Fear. Because the message was clear. He could reach her anywhere. Locks and doors meant nothing. She typed back with trembling fingers. "You had no right to come into my home." The response came immediately. "I had every right. You're carrying my children. Your safety is my concern. The locks on your door wouldn't stop a determined teenager. I've arranged for better ones. The locksmith will arrive at 9. Elena wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, she forced herself to breathe, to think tactically. Victor was already moving, already reshaping the world to fit his vision of how this should go. If she didn't establish boundaries now, immediately, she'd wake up one day and find herself back in that gilded cage, only this time with 2 babies to protect. "I don't want your locks. I don't want your security. I want to be left alone." That's not an option anymore. 10 a.m., Elena. Please be dressed. The please didn't soften the command. If anything, it made it worse. A thin veneer of courtesy over pure control. Elena set the phone down and pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Less than 12 hours, and he was already dictating her schedule, making decisions about her life, treating her like property to be secured. At 8:30, there was a knock at the door. Elena checked the peephole and saw a young woman in work clothes holding a toolbox. Behind her stood one of Victor's men, the same one from last night. Paolo. Miss Carter, the woman called. I'm here to upgrade your locks. Mr. Romano sent me. I didn't ask for new locks. I understand, ma'am, but Mr. Romano was very clear. These locks are a safety issue. It'll take 30 minutes, tops, and then we'll be out of your hair. Elena closed her eyes. She could refuse, she could send them away, but they'd just come back, or Victor would show up himself, and she'd end up having this fight a dozen times. Pick your battles, Sarah had told her once. Save your energy for the wars that matter. She opened the door. 30 minutes, and he doesn't get a key. The locksmith smiled. Already been told, ma'am. You get the only copies, 3 of them. It was a small concession, but it felt like a victory. Elena stepped aside and let the woman work, watching as she removed the cheap hardware store locks and replaced them with heavy-duty deadbolts, the kind you saw in bank vaults. Paolo stood in the hallway, keeping watch, his presence a constant reminder that privacy was an illusion now. All set, the locksmith announced 25 minutes later. She handed Elena 3 gleaming keys. These are pick-resistant, drill-resistant, and the deadbolts have a 5-pin tumbler system. Nobody's getting through these without serious equipment and time. Thank you, Elena said, even though gratitude felt wrong. She hadn't wanted this, but looking at the solid new locks, she couldn't deny feeling slightly safer. Slightly. The locksmith left. Paolo remained. Miss Carter, I'll be outside if you need anything. Mr. Romano's orders are that you're not to be disturbed, but I'm here if there's an emergency. I don't need a babysitter. No, ma'am, you need a bodyguard. There's a difference. His voice was respectful, but firm. Mr. Romano has enemies. Some of them would be very interested to know about you and the babies. My job is to make sure they never get the chance to act on that interest. The reality of it hit Elena like cold water. She'd been so focused on escaping Victor's control that she'd almost forgotten the other dangers that came with being connected to him. The rival families, the federal investigations, the constant threat of violence that hung over everything he touched. Her daughters would be born into that world. They would be targets from their first breath. How long have you worked for him? She asked quietly. 8 years, ma'am. Have you ever seen him change, compromise? Paolo considered the question carefully. Mr. Romano is difficult. He doesn't bend easy, but I've also never seen him like he was last night. In 8 years, I've never seen him scared. Last night, sitting in that car, waiting to see if you'd talk to him, he was terrified. Elena didn't know what to do with that information. The idea of Victor Romano being afraid of anything seemed impossible, but Paolo had no reason to lie. At exactly 10 o'clock, another knock. This time it was a woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather briefcase. She had sharp eyes behind designer glasses and the kind of presence that suggested she didn't waste time on nonsense. Miss Carter, I'm Catherine Wright. May I come in? Elena stepped aside. Catherine entered, taking in the small apartment with a quick, assessing glance that revealed nothing of her thoughts. Paolo closed the door behind her, remaining outside. Thank you for seeing me, Catherine said, setting her briefcase on the small table that served as Elena's dining area. I understand this situation is complicated. My goal this morning is to help both you and Mr. Romano establish a framework that protects everyone's interests, particularly those of the children. You work for Victor. I work for the Romano family, which now includes you and your daughters. Catherine's voice was crisp but not unkind. My job is to ensure legal protections are in place. That benefits you as much as it benefits Mr. Romano. Elena sat down across from her, wary. What kind of protections? Catherine opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder. Let's start with the basics. Prenatal care. Mr. Romano is concerned about the quality of medical attention you're receiving. He'd like to arrange for you to see Dr. Sarah Chen at Mount Sinai. She's one of the best maternal fetal medicine specialists in the country. I already have a doctor. I'm sure you do, but given that you're carrying twins, and given the resources available through the Romano family, wouldn't you want access to the absolute best care? Catherine pulled out a document. This is Dr. Chen's credentials. She's handled numerous high-risk pregnancies. She's also very discreet. Elena looked at the paperwork. The credentials were impressive. And if she was honest with herself, the small clinic in Queens where she'd been going was fine for basic care, but probably not equipped for complications. Twin pregnancies were automatically considered high risk. If I agree to see this doctor, I want to be clear that it's my choice, not Victor's order. Absolutely. You have complete autonomy over your medical decisions. Catherine made a note. Next item. Living arrangements. Mr. Romano understands you want to maintain your own residence. However, he's concerned about the safety and appropriateness of this location. He's prepared to offer several alternatives. I'm not moving into his penthouse. No one's suggesting that. But Miss Carter, this building has no security. It's in a neighborhood with a significant crime rate, and frankly, the conditions aren't suitable for raising children. Catherine pulled out another set of documents. These are 3 properties Mr. Romano owns in Brooklyn. Townhouses, all in safe neighborhoods, all with security systems. You would have complete independence, but the protection you and the babies need. Elena looked through the listings. The properties were beautiful, restored brownstones in Park Slope and Brooklyn Heights, the kind of places she'd fantasized about when she was with Victor, but never imagined she'd actually live in. Not like this. Not as a transaction. What's the catch? No catch. You would live there rent-free. Mr. Romano would cover all expenses. In exchange, you agree to reasonable security measures, and you allow him regular access to visit the children once they're born. Define reasonable. Catherine met her eyes. 1 guard posted outside. Security system monitored by his team. You come and go as you please, but someone always knows where you are. For safety, not surveillance. That sounds a lot like surveillance. It sounds like protection. Catherine's voice sharpened slightly. Miss Carter, I'm going to be blunt. You're carrying the heirs to a crime family. Whether you like it or not, that makes you a target. Victor Romano has been building his empire for 15 years, and in that time he's made enemies. Powerful enemies. People who would love nothing more than to hurt him by hurting what he loves. That's not paranoia. That's reality. Elena's hand moved to her belly, protective. She hated that Catherine was right. Hated that the simple act of loving Victor, of being loved by him, had put a target on her back and on her daughter's backs before they were even born. I need time to think about the housing. Of course. There's no rush on that decision. Catherine moved to the next document. Now, let's discuss custody arrangements. They're not even born yet. Which is exactly the right time to establish clear expectations. Mr. Romano wants to be an active father. He wants time with his daughters, regular visitation, involvement in major decisions about their upbringing. In exchange, he's willing to provide substantial financial support, not just child support, but education funds, trust funds, anything the children might need. I don't want his money. Catherine raised an eyebrow. Miss Carter, you're currently living in a studio apartment doing freelance bookkeeping. I'm not judging your choices, but raising 1 child is expensive. Raising 2 is exponentially more so. Mr. Romano's offer ensures your daughters never want for anything. I can provide for my children. Can you provide private security, top-tier education, medical care that costs more per month than most people's salaries? Catherine leaned forward. I admire your independence, I do. But pride is expensive, and your daughters will be the ones who pay the price. The words stung because they were true. Elena had been so focused on escaping Victor's control that she hadn't fully processed the financial reality of raising twins alone in one of the most expensive cities in the world. Her freelance work paid enough to keep her fed and housed, barely. It wouldn't stretch to cover childcare, medical bills, everything 2 babies would need. What does he want in exchange? Joint legal custody. Decisions about education, medical care, religious upbringing, you make them together. He gets regular visitation, increasing as the children get older. Holidays are split, and you agree not to relocate more than 100 miles from New York without his consent. That last part is him controlling where I live. That last part is him ensuring he can be a father to his children. Catherine's voice softened. Miss Carter, I've been doing family law for 26 years. I've seen every variation of custody battle, every nightmare scenario. This is one of the most reasonable agreements I've seen from a man with Mr. Romano's resources. He could tie you up in court for years. He could make your life hell. Instead, he's offering compromise. Elena stared at the documents spread across her table. her small life being reorganized into legal terms and conditions. Part of her wanted to refuse everything, to tell Catherine and Victor and all of it to go to hell. But another part, the part that felt her daughters moving inside her, the part that remembered Paolo's words about Victor being scared, wondered if maybe this was what compromise looked like. Imperfect, uncomfortable, but possible. "I want changes," she said finally. "To the custody agreement. I want final say on medical decisions. I want the right to relocate if I have legitimate safety concerns. And I want it in writing that he can't use his resources to manipulate or control me." Catherine smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. "Those are all reasonable requests. I'll draft an amendment. Is there anything else?" "Yes. I want therapy. For both of us. If we're going to co-parent, if we're going to be in each other's lives, we need help learning how to communicate without destroying each other." "I'll add that to the agreement." Catherine made notes. "Mr. Romano may resist that particular clause." "Then he doesn't get what he wants." Elena's voice was firm. "That's non-negotiable." They spent the next hour going through details, line by line, Elena questioning everything, Catherine explaining the legal implications. By the time they finished, Elena's head was throbbing and she was exhausted, but she also felt something she hadn't felt in months, a sense of agency. She was negotiating. She was setting terms. She wasn't just a victim of Victor's will. Catherine packed up her documents. "I'll have a revised agreement drafted by tomorrow. Once you've reviewed it and approved the changes, we can schedule a formal signing. In the meantime, I'd recommend you think seriously about the housing situation. This apartment really isn't suitable." "I'll think about it." "Good." Catherine paused at the door. "Miss Carter, for what it's worth, I think you're being very brave. It takes strength to stand up to a man like Victor Romano. Most people just fold." "I tried folding," Elena said quietly. "It almost killed me." After Catherine left, Elena sat alone in her apartment, staring at the business card the lawyer had left behind. Through the window, she could see Paolo's replacement, a different guard, younger, standing on the corner with the studied casualness of someone trying not to look like they were watching her building. Her phone buzzed. "Victor." "How did the meeting go?" Elena typed back, "Your lawyer is terrifying." "She's very good at her job. Did you agree to the medical care?" "I'll think about it." "Elena, this isn't something to think about. You need the best prenatal care available." She could feel her temper rising. This was exactly the problem. He couldn't just suggest something, couldn't just offer help. He had to push, had to insist, had to make it an order disguised as concern. "I said I'll think about it. That means I'll think about it. Not that you get to decide for me." A pause. Then, "You're right. I'm sorry. Take your time." Elena stared at the phone. Victor Romano apologizing was so rare it felt like a trick. But Catherine had said he was trying. Paolo had said he was scared. Maybe, impossibly, he was actually capable of change. Her phone buzzed again. "Can I see you tonight? Just dinner. We can talk about the agreement, about what you want to change." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please, no pressure, no agenda, just two people who need to figure out how to be in each other's lives." Elena closed her eyes. Every instinct screamed at her to say no, to maintain distance, to protect herself, but they were going to be connected forever now. They needed to learn how to be in the same room without it turning into a war. "Somewhere public," she typed, "and I leave when I want to leave." "Anywhere you want. You pick the place." She named a small Italian restaurant in her neighborhood, nothing fancy, just a place where she'd feel safe. Victor agreed immediately, and they set a time for 7. After the exchange ended, Elena sat holding her phone and wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. At 6:30, she stood in front of her small closet, trying to figure out what to wear to dinner with your ex-husband, who was also the father of your unborn children and also a crime boss. Everything felt wrong, too formal, too casual, too much like she was trying to impress him, or too much like she didn't care. Finally, she settled on a simple black dress that accommodated her growing belly and a cardigan. Nothing special, just dinner. The restaurant was a 10-minute walk, but Paolo, or his replacement, a man who'd introduced himself as Dominic, insisted on driving her. Elena didn't have the energy to argue. She sat in the back of the black SUV and watched her neighborhood slide past, thinking about all the time she'd walked these streets alone. Anonymous. Free. Victor was waiting outside the restaurant when they arrived. He wore dark jeans and a black sweater, casual by his standards, and he looked nervous. Actually nervous. His hands were in his pockets, his shoulders tense, his eyes scanning the street until they landed on the SUV. Dominic opened Elena's door. She stepped out, and Victor immediately moved toward her, then stopped himself, clearly fighting the urge to reach for her. Instead, he just said, "Thank you for coming." "I'm here for them," Elena said, gesturing to her belly. "Not for you. Let's be clear about that." Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or resignation. "I understand." Inside, the restaurant was warm and dimly lit, the kind of place that served huge portions and didn't care if you lingered over your meal. The owner, an older Italian woman named Rosa, greeted them with a smile that faltered when she recognized Victor. Everyone in the neighborhood knew who the Romanos were. You didn't run a business in New York without knowing. "Mr. Romano," Rosa said carefully, "we're honored. Please, the back table." They were seated in a corner that offered privacy while still being visible to the other diners. Elena appreciated that. No isolated rooms, no opportunities for Victor to turn this into something she couldn't escape. Dominic took a position near the front, trying to blend in and failing spectacularly. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Victor studied the menu like it was a contract he was negotiating. Elena watched him, this man she'd loved and fled, and tried to reconcile the different versions of him in her mind. The attentive boyfriend who'd surprised her with weekend trips to Paris, the controlling husband who'd monitored her every movement, the terrified father-to-be sitting across from her now. "Catherine said you want changes to the agreement," Victor said finally, setting down the menu. "I want you to know I'm willing to negotiate. Really negotiate, not just pretend to and then do what I want anyway." "That's a low bar, Victor." "I know." He met her eyes. "I know what I was like. I know what I put you through. And I know saying I'm sorry doesn't fix any of it. But I am sorry for all of it." Elena felt her throat tighten. She'd imagined this conversation 1,000 times during her 6 months away. Imagined him apologizing. Imagined it feeling like victory. But sitting here now, seeing the genuine regret in his face, it just felt sad. Sad for what they'd destroyed, for what they'd been and could never be again. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do it? Why did you have to control everything?" Victor was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost inaudible. "My father died when I was 15. Someone planted a bomb in his car. I watched the whole thing. I was supposed to be in that car with him, but I'd forgotten something and run back inside. I saw the explosion from the window." Elena's hand moved to her mouth. She'd known Victor's father had died, but she'd never known the details. He'd never talked about it. "After that, my uncle took over the family business. He was cruel, paranoid. He saw threats everywhere. And half the time he was right. People died. People I knew. People I cared about. And I learned that the only way to survive in this world was to control everything, to never let your guard down, to never trust that anything was safe unless you'd personally made it safe." Victor's hands clenched on the table. "When I met you, when I fell in love with you, it terrified me. Because you were this thing I couldn't control, this variable I couldn't account for. And instead of letting you be free, instead of trusting that you'd stay because you wanted to, I tried to lock you down, make you safe by making you mine. You made me a prisoner. I know. And I told myself it was love, that I was protecting you, but really, I was just trying to control my own fear." He looked up at her. "Elena, I can't promise I won't be scared. I can't promise I won't want to wrap you and our daughters in every protection I can buy. But I'm trying to understand that safety and control aren't the same thing. That loving you means trusting you to make your own choices, even when those choices scare the hell out of me." The waitress appeared and they ordered, more to have something to do with their hands than because either of them was particularly hungry. After she left, Elena said, "I need you to understand something. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because staying was killing me. Every day I felt a little smaller, a little less myself. And I knew if I didn't get out, there wouldn't be anything left of me. I understand that now. Victor's voice was rough. I didn't then. When you left, I thought you'd just come back. I thought you'd realize you couldn't make it without me and you'd come home. It took me 2 months to accept that you were really gone, and then I spent the next 4 trying to find you so I could, I don't know, make you understand, make you come back, force you to love me again. You can't force love, Victor. No, you can't. He paused. But you can earn it. Maybe. If you're willing to change, to be better than you were. That's what I'm trying to do. Their food arrived. They ate in silence for a while, the weight of confession and history hanging between them. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with normal conversations, normal lives, people who didn't have to negotiate with crime bosses about how to love each other without destruction. Catherine mentioned therapy, Victor said eventually, for both of us. That's non-negotiable. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be co-parents, we need help. I hate therapists. I know, you're going anyway. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. You're different, stronger. I had to be. You taught me that. Elena set down her fork. Victor, I need you to hear this. I will never go back to being that woman who lived in your penthouse and let you make all her decisions. That version of me is gone. If you want to be part of my life, part of our daughters' lives, it has to be on equal terms. Partnership, not ownership. I hear you. He reached across the table, then stopped himself, his hand hovering in the space between them. May I? Elena looked at his hand, at the question in his eyes. Slowly, she reached out and let her fingers brush his. The contact sent electricity through her, muscle memory of intimacy mixed with fear and longing and regret. The townhouse in Park Slope, she said quietly. The one with the garden. I'll take that. For the babies. Victor's fingers tightened on hers. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just prove to me that you can do this, that you can be the man you're claiming to be. I will. I promise. They finished dinner talking about logistics, the doctor's appointment Catherine had mentioned, the timeline for signing the custody agreement, practical matters that felt safer than emotions. By the time they left the restaurant, something had shifted between them. Not forgiveness, not exactly, but maybe the beginning of it. The possibility that 2 broken people could figure out how to exist in each other's orbit without destroying everything they touched. Outside, Dominic was waiting with the SUV. Victor walked Elena to the car, his hand hovering near her lower back but not quite touching, respecting the distance she needed. Can I ask you something? He said as Dominic opened the door. Okay. What are you going to name them? Our daughters. Elena hadn't expected that question. She'd been thinking about names, writing lists late at night, but she hadn't shared them with anyone. I don't know yet. I thought maybe we could decide together. When they're born. The smile that crossed Victor's face was genuine, reaching his eyes. I'd like that. Elena climbed into the SUV, and as Dominic pulled away from the curb, she looked back to see Victor standing on the sidewalk, watching her go. He looked lonely, she thought. Lonely and hopeful and scared. Just like her. Back in her apartment, with the new locks engaged and the guard outside and the weight of the day pressing down on her, Elena lay in bed and felt her daughters moving. Strong kicks now, getting more insistent as they grew. She put her hand on her belly and whispered, Your father is complicated. He's dangerous and controlling, and sometimes I think loving him is the worst decision I ever made. But he's trying, and maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all we can ask for. The babies kicked in response, and Elena closed her eyes. And for the first time in 6 months, she let herself believe that maybe, impossibly, this could work. That maybe Victor could change. That maybe they could build something new from the ruins of what they'd destroyed. It was a fragile hope. But it was hope nonetheless. And right now, that was all she had. The townhouse in Park Slope was everything Elena had dreamed of, and everything she'd feared accepting. 3 stories of restored brownstone, with original hardwood floors and crown molding, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in streams of morning light, and a small garden out back where she could already imagine her daughters playing someday. It was beautiful. It was generous. And it came with strings, invisible but undeniable, tying her back to Victor in ways that made her chest tighten every time she walked through the renovated kitchen or stood in the nursery he'd had professionally designed before she'd even agreed to move in. 2 weeks had passed since their dinner at the Italian restaurant. 2 weeks of lawyers and negotiations, of doctor's appointments with the specialist Victor had insisted on, of slowly, carefully learning to exist in each other's presence without the conversations exploding into accusations and old wounds. Doctor. Sarah Chen had confirmed what Elena already suspected. The twin pregnancy was high risk, her blood pressure creeping upward in ways that concerned everyone. Bed rest wasn't ordered yet, but it was hovering as a possibility. Another way her body was betraying her desire for independence. She'd signed the custody agreement 3 days ago, sitting in Catherine Wright's office with Victor across the table, both of them treating it like the treaty it was. Joint legal custody. Generous financial support that Elena had stopped pretending she didn't desperately need. Visitation rights that felt reasonable on paper but filled her with anxiety in practice. And the therapy clause, which Victor had agreed to with visible reluctance, his jaw tight as he signed his name. Their first session was scheduled for tomorrow. Elena was dreading it. Now she stood in the nursery, surrounded by boxes she was supposed to be unpacking, and tried to make this feel like home. 2 cribs, white and pristine, already assembled. A changing table stocked with diapers and supplies she hadn't bought. A rocking chair positioned near the window, comfortable and inviting. Everything perfect. Everything chosen without her input, appearing like magic while she'd been at a prenatal appointment. Her phone buzzed. Victor. How's the unpacking going? Elena looked around at the chaos of half-opened boxes, at her meager possessions trying to fill a space 3 times the size of her old apartment. Slowly. Do you need help? I can send people. No, I need to do this myself. She paused, then added, but thank you for asking instead of just doing it. I'm learning. There was a smile in his voice. There's a security briefing at 3 p.m. Marco will go over the house systems with you. Please don't skip it. I wasn't planning to. Good. And Elena? His tone shifted, became more serious. I know this is hard. I know accepting help feels like giving up control. But you're not alone in this. I want you to remember that. After they hung up, Elena sat in the rocking chair and closed her eyes. The house was quiet, insulated from the street noise in a way her old apartment never had been. Through the walls, she could hear nothing. No neighbors arguing, no footsteps overhead, no sirens passing outside. Just silence and the sound of her own breathing and the flutter of movement in her belly. She was 28 weeks now. The babies were growing faster, their kicks stronger, their presence impossible to ignore. Sometimes, late at night, she'd lie awake and feel them moving and wonder what kind of world she was bringing them into. A world where their father was Victor Romano. A world where armed guards were a necessity, not paranoia. A world where violence lurked at the edges of every beautiful thing. At 3 o'clock, Marco arrived with another man Elena didn't recognize, both of them carrying tablets and looking professional. Marco had been nothing but respectful since that night on the crosswalk, his manner courteous but distant, treating her like the job she essentially was, a principal to be protected. Miss Carter, Marco said, nodding. This is James Reeves. He's going to walk you through the security system while I cover protocols. For the next hour, they showed her everything. The cameras covering every entrance, the reinforced doors and windows, the panic buttons installed in every room, including the bathrooms, the safe room in the basement stocked with supplies and communications equipment, the escape routes, the emergency contacts. It was overwhelming and terrifying, and somehow exactly what she'd expected. The system is monitored 24/7, James explained, pulling up the interface on her phone. You'll get alerts for any unusual activity. You can check the cameras any time, and there's always someone watching remotely, just in case. Someone watching, Elena repeated. You mean someone watching me? James had the grace to look uncomfortable. We're watching the perimeter, Miss Carter. Not you. There's no cameras inside the house except in the entrance hall and the stairwell. Your privacy is respected. Except I'll never actually be alone. Marco stepped forward. With respect, you shouldn't be alone. Not at this stage of pregnancy, and not given the circumstances. What if something happened? What if you fell, or went into early labor, or... I understand the reasoning, Elena cut him off. That doesn't mean I have to like it. No one expects you to like it. But Mr. Romano has enemies. Real ones. People who would hurt you to get to him. Marco's voice was gentle but firm. I know you value your independence. I respect that. But your safety, and your daughter's safety, has to come first. He was right, and Elena hated it. Hated that her choices had led her here, to this beautiful prison wrapped in concern and protection. Hated that loving Victor, even briefly, had marked her permanently as a target. After they left, she wandered through the house, testing the new knowledge of locks and cameras and panic buttons. In the kitchen, she found the refrigerator fully stocked with healthy food, prenatal-approved meals already prepared and labeled. In the bathroom, expensive lotions and oils for pregnancy appeared alongside her drugstore products. In the bedroom, the bed had been made with sheets that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Victor's touch was everywhere, generous and suffocating in equal measure. That evening, Sarah came over with Chinese takeout and a bottle of sparkling cider, settling onto the couch with the ease of someone determined to pretend everything was normal. This place is incredible, Sarah said, looking around. I mean, I knew Victor had money, but this is too much, Elena finished. It's too much. I feel like I'm playing house in someone else's life. You're being given a chance to provide your daughters with stability and safety. That's not nothing. Sarah handed her a container of lo mein. How are you feeling? Really? Elena poked at her noodles. Scared, angry, grateful, resentful. All of it at once, all the time. Dr. Chen says my blood pressure is concerning. She's talking about bed rest if it doesn't improve. And Victor? Is trying, I think. We have our first therapy session tomorrow, and I can already tell he's going to hate every second of it. Elena set down her food. Sarah, what if this doesn't work? What if we can't figure out how to do this without destroying each other? Then you'll cross that bridge when you come to it. But Elena, you have to actually try. You have to give him a real chance to prove he can change. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. I know I was the one pushing you to leave. I know I saw what he was doing to you, but I also see that he's making an effort now. Maybe not perfectly. Maybe not in ways that feel comfortable, but he's trying. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet that only existed between old friends. Eventually, Sarah said, Have you thought about what happens after the babies are born? Every second of every day. Elena's hand moved to her belly. I think about whether Victor will try to take them from me, whether I'll be strong enough to maintain boundaries when I'm exhausted and outnumbered, whether they'll grow up thinking this is normal, the guards, the surveillance, the constant threat of violence. Or maybe they'll grow up knowing they're loved by both parents, even if those parents have a complicated relationship. Sarah stood, gathering the empty containers. You're catastrophizing. It's understandable, but you're borrowing trouble from a future that hasn't happened yet. Focus on now, on staying healthy, on preparing for their arrival. The rest will figure itself out. After Sarah left, Elena prepared for bed in the master bathroom, another space that felt too large, too luxurious. She was brushing her teeth when her phone rang. Victor. I'm sorry to call so late, he said. I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're settling in okay. I'm fine. The house it's beautiful, Victor. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. It's for our daughters. A pause. Can I ask you something? Okay. Are you afraid of me? The question caught her off guard. Elena sat on the edge of the bathtub, trying to formulate an honest answer. Sometimes. Not that you'd hurt me physically, but that you'd overwhelm me again. Take over my life until I can't breathe. That kind of afraid. I'm afraid of that too, he said quietly. I'm afraid I'll fall back into old patterns without realizing it. That I'll start making decisions for you, justifying it as protection, and wake up one day to find you've left again. I don't think I could survive that twice. The vulnerability in his voice was startling. Elena had heard Victor angry, passionate, commanding, but this raw honesty was new, uncomfortable for both of them. Then we both need to pay attention, she said. We both need to be honest when something doesn't feel right. That's what therapy is for, I think, to help us see the patterns before they become problems. I'm not good at therapy. You've been to therapy before? Once. After my father died, my uncle sent me to someone who was supposed to help me process my grief. Victor's tone dripped sarcasm. What she actually did was try to medicate me into submission. I lasted 3 sessions before I walked out and never went back. Elena closed her eyes, adding another piece to the puzzle of Victor Romano. This will be different. We're choosing this, both of us. And if the therapist isn't right, we'll find another one. Okay. He sounded doubtful but willing. I should let you sleep. Dr. Chen said you need more rest. Good night, Victor. Good night, Elena. And I'm glad you're safe. In the house, I sleep better knowing you're protected. After he hung up, Elena sat in the quiet bathroom and let herself admit something she'd been avoiding. She slept better too. The new locks, the security system, the guards outside. As much as she resented the loss of privacy, there was a part of her that felt safer, that could exhale slightly, knowing that if something happened, help was seconds away. It was a complicated relief, but relief nonetheless. The next morning brought her first appointment with Dr. Reina Martinez, the therapist Catherine had recommended. The office was in a discreet building in Manhattan, the kind of place where patient confidentiality was taken seriously and discretion was built into the architecture. Victor was already in the waiting room when Elena arrived, his leg bouncing with nervous energy, his expression guarded. You came, Elena said, surprised despite herself. I said I would. He stood as she approached. I don't break my promises to you. They were called back together, entering a warm office filled with plants and comfortable furniture that seemed designed to put people at ease. Dr. Martinez was younger than Elena expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that suggested she'd heard every variation of human dysfunction and wasn't shocked by any of it. Thank you both for coming, she said, gesturing to a couch. I understand this is court-ordered? It's agreement-ordered, Victor corrected. We're here voluntarily. Voluntarily under duress, Elena added. I insisted on it as part of our custody negotiation. Dr. Martinez smiled. Honesty, good. That's what we need here. Let me explain how this works. My job isn't to take sides or to fix your relationship. My job is to help you communicate effectively, especially as co-parents. You don't have to like each other. You don't have to be together. But you do need to be able to talk about your children without it becoming a war. For the next hour, Dr. Martinez asked questions, gently probing the history of their relationship, how they met, how they fell in love, what went wrong. Victor was tense throughout, his answers clipped and defensive. Elena found herself doing most of the talking, years of suppressed feelings pouring out in a rush. He made every decision, Elena explained. What I wore to events, who I could see, where I could go. He'd say it was for my safety, that his world was dangerous, but really, it was just control. And you felt trapped, Dr. Martinez said. I felt like I was disappearing, like I was becoming this doll version of myself that existed just to be what he needed. Dr. Martinez turned to Victor. Is that how you saw it? That you were controlling her? Victor's hands clenched on his knees. I saw threats everywhere. My world is dangerous. People die. And Elena, she was so innocent, so unaware of what could happen. I thought if I could just keep her close, keep her safe, nothing bad would touch her. So you loved her by limiting her. I loved her by protecting her. His voice rose slightly. Is it controlling to not want the woman you love kidnapped, killed, used as leverage? It's controlling when you don't give her a choice in how that protection looks, Dr. Martinez said calmly. Victor, help me understand something. When Elena tried to talk to you about needing more freedom, what happened? He stopped, his jaw working. I didn't listen. I told her she was being naive, that she didn't understand the dangers. You dismissed her concerns. Yes. And Elena, when he dismissed you, what did you do? I stopped trying to talk to him. I just pulled away, started planning my escape. Elena's voice shook. I should have tried harder to make him understand, should have been more direct. Or Victor should have listened the first time you spoke. Dr. Martinez looked between them. Here's what I'm hearing. Victor, you respond to fear with control. Elena, you respond to control by withdrawing. These are incompatible coping mechanisms. If we don't address them, you're going to repeat this cycle with your daughters in the middle of it." The bluntness of the statement landed like a physical blow. Victor flinched. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "So what do we do?" Victor asked, and for the first time since Elena had known him, he sounded genuinely lost. "We start with communication, real communication, not just talking at each other. We establish boundaries and respect them. We practice sitting with discomfort instead of trying to control it away." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "And we acknowledge that both of you have trauma that's driving your behavior. Victor, you watched your father die. That's going to create hypervigilance. Elena, you experienced emotional abuse in your marriage. That's going to create fear of being controlled. Neither of those responses is wrong, but they can't drive your interactions anymore." They spent the rest of the session practicing what Dr. Martinez called active listening, repeating back what the other person said before responding, asking clarifying questions instead of assuming intent. It was awkward and stilted, both of them fumbling through exercises that felt artificial, but there was something powerful in it too. In hearing Victor say, "What I'm hearing is that you felt invisible in our marriage, is that right?" And Elena responding, "What I'm hearing is that you were terrified something would happen to me, is that right?" When the session ended, they walked out together in silence, processing. On the street, Victor's car was waiting, but he made no move toward it. "That was harder than I expected," he said finally. "Yeah." Elena pulled her coat tighter against the March wind. "But maybe useful?" "Maybe." He looked at her, and there was something raw in his expression. "I never thought about it that way, that I was dismissing you. In my head, I was just keeping you safe." "I know. But Victor, your intentions don't change the impact. I still felt suffocated." "I know. I'm starting to understand that." He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Can I drive you home?" "No agenda, just, I don't like you taking the subway in your condition." Elena almost said no on principle, but she was tired, her back ached, and the subway stairs seemed insurmountable suddenly. "Okay, but I'm choosing the music." The corner of his mouth ticked up. "Deal." In the car, Elena connected her phone and played the indie folk Victor had always hated, smiling slightly when he grimaced but didn't complain. They drove through Manhattan in companionable quiet, and for a moment, Elena could almost pretend they were just two people who'd loved each other once, instead of two people trying to figure out how to not destroy each other now. "I have a business dinner Friday," Victor said as they crossed into Brooklyn. "It's important. Potential partners from overseas. I know this is asking a lot, but would you consider coming? As my guest, not as an obligation. You can leave whenever you want. No pressure." Elena's first instinct was to refuse. Public appearances with Victor meant stepping back into that world, being seen as connected to him again. But she thought about Dr. Martinez's words about trying, about making effort from both sides. "What's the dress code?" "Formal. But I can have something sent over, maternity appropriate." "I'll find my own dress," Elena interrupted. "If I'm coming as myself, not as a version of me you've styled." Victor nodded, accepting the boundary. "Okay, thank you. It would mean a lot to have you there." The rest of the week passed in a strange new rhythm. Victor called every evening, not to demand or control, but just to check in, to ask about her day, to share small details about his. They were learning each other again, carefully, like people who'd been burned touching fire to see if it was still hot. Elena spent her days nesting, slowly making the townhouse feel like hers. She hung her own artwork, rearranged furniture, filled the kitchen with her favorite teas. The guards rotated shifts outside, and she learned their names, started to see them as people rather than symbols of her captivity. Dominic had a daughter in college. Paolo was getting married in the summer. They were just men doing a job, and that job happened to be keeping her alive. Dr. Chen visited for a home check, monitoring Elena's blood pressure and the baby's growth. Everything was progressing well, but the warnings about bed rest persisted. "You need to slow down," Dr. Chen said firmly. "I know you're trying to nest, but your body needs rest more than it needs a perfectly organized nursery." Friday arrived too quickly. Elena spent the afternoon getting ready, struggling into a black maternity gown she'd found at a boutique in Park Slope. It was elegant without being flashy, fitted enough to show she was pregnant but not so tight that she felt exposed. She did her own hair and makeup, asserting control over the small things she could control. Victor arrived at 7 in a black suit that probably cost more than her first car, his expression carefully neutral until he saw her. Then something shifted in his eyes, heat and appreciation, and something softer that looked almost like wonder. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "I look pregnant." "You look beautiful pregnant." He offered his arm. "Ready?" The dinner was at an exclusive restaurant in Tribeca, the kind of place that didn't have prices on the menu and where everyone knew everyone. Victor's business associates were already there when they arrived, 2 men and a woman, all impeccably dressed, all radiating the kind of power that came from controlling resources others needed. "Gentlemen, Mrs. Romano," Victor said, his hand at Elena's lower back. The touch was light, asking permission rather than assuming it. "May I introduce Elena Carter? Elena, this is Mr. Dmitry Volkov and his associates." Elena shook hands, smiling politely while her mind raced. Volkov. She knew that name. Russian shipping, legitimate business with deeply questionable ties. The kind of people Victor did business with when he was expanding his empire into territories that made even his usual operations look tame. The dinner conversation flowed around her in multiple languages: English, Italian, Russian. Elena ate slowly, watching the dynamics, the careful dance of negotiation disguised as friendly conversation. Victor was masterful at it, charming and ruthless in turns, making promises that sounded casual but carried the weight of contracts. At one point, Volkov's female associate, a sharp-eyed woman named Irina, leaned toward Elena. "It's unusual for Mr. Romano to bring anyone to business dinners. You must be very special." "I'm the mother of his children," Elena said evenly. "I imagine that makes me notable, if not special." Irina laughed, a genuine sound. "I like her, Victor. She has spine." "Yes," Victor said, his eyes meeting Elena's across the table. "She does." The evening stretched on, courses appearing and disappearing, wine flowing for everyone but Elena. She was starting to feel tired, her back aching from the chair, when suddenly the conversation at the table shifted. Volkov said something in Russian, his tone sharp. Victor's entire demeanor changed, his body tensing, his expression going cold and dangerous. "That's not acceptable," Victor said in English, his voice like ice. "We had an agreement." "Agreements change," Volkov replied, switching to English as well. "The market has shifted. The terms need to shift with it." Elena felt the temperature in the room drop. Around them, other diners continued their meals, oblivious to the confrontation brewing. But the 2 bodyguards who'd been standing near the entrance suddenly moved closer, alert. "The terms were set," Victor said. "You don't get to renegotiate after I've already committed resources." "Then uncommit them." Volkov's smile was sharp. "Or accept the new reality. Your choice, Romano." The tension was a living thing, pressing down on everyone at the table. Elena's heart raced. This was Victor's world, where business dinners could turn into threats, where control and power were constantly being tested. She wanted to leave, to get away from this, but moving now would show weakness. And weakness, she'd learned, was dangerous in this world. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and Elena saw his expression shift from cold anger to something else, something that looked like alarm. "Excuse me," he said, standing. "I need to take this." He walked away from the table, his phone pressed to his ear. Elena watched him go, watched his body language shift as whoever was on the other end delivered news that made his shoulders tighten. When he returned to the table, his face was a mask. "I apologize, but I need to leave. Family emergency." He looked at Volkov. "We'll continue this discussion another time, under the original terms." It wasn't a request. It was a statement of fact, delivered with enough force that even Volkov didn't argue. Victor helped Elena from her chair, his hand gentle despite the obvious tension radiating through him. In the car, Elena asked, "What's wrong?" "There's been an incident. One of my warehouses in Red Hook. Fire, possibly arson." His jaw was tight. "Marco's team is handling it, but I need to be there." "Is anyone hurt?" "We don't know yet." He looked at her. "I'm taking you home first. Dominic will stay with you." "Victor, if this is serious..." You're more serious, you and our daughters. He took her hand, squeezing gently. I need you safe before I can deal with anything else. They pulled up to the townhouse 20 minutes later. Dominic was already waiting outside, his expression grim. Victor walked Elena to the door, checking the locks and the security system himself before he'd leave. I'll call you when I know more, he promised. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone but the guards. Promise me. I promise. Be careful. Always. He hesitated, then leaned in and kissed her forehead, a brief touch that sent warmth through her entire body. Thank you for coming tonight. For trying. Then he was gone, disappearing into his car, Dominic closing the door behind her with a firm click. Elena stood in the entrance hall of her beautiful, protected house and listened to the sound of Victor's car driving away into whatever danger was waiting for him. She climbed the stairs to the bedroom, her body heavy with exhaustion and worry. The babies were active, rolling and kicking, responding to her elevated heart rate. She changed into pajamas and lay down, trying to calm herself, trying not to imagine all the ways tonight could go wrong. Her phone rang at midnight. Victor. Everything okay? She asked immediately. It was arson. Professional job. No one was hurt, thank God, but the building's a total loss. He sounded tired. We're dealing with it. Was it Volkov? Retaliation for you not backing down? Maybe. Probably. I won't know for sure until we investigate. A pause. I'm sorry you had to see that tonight. The business side of things. It's ugly. It's your world. If I'm going to be in your life, even tangentially, I need to understand it. Elena rolled onto her side, the phone pressed to her ear. Are you safe? Yes, I'm always safe. That's not true, and we both know it. Silence. Then, no. It's not true. But I'm good at what I do, Elena. I know how to handle threats. That doesn't make me feel better. I know. His voice softened. Get some rest. We have therapy again Tuesday. I'll see you before then. After they hung up, Elena lay in the dark and thought about the reality of what she'd signed up for. Not just co-parenting with Victor, but existing adjacent to his world. A world where warehouses burned and business partners threatened and violence lurked constantly at the edges. A world her daughters would be born into, whether she wanted it or not. Sleep came slowly, troubled by dreams of fire and locked doors and Victor's face as he'd left, equal parts determination and fear. When she woke in the morning, her first thought was to check her phone for messages. There was one from Victor, sent at 3 a.m. Everything's handled, sleep well. And underneath it, a photo. Not of the warehouse or the damage. Just of the sunrise over Manhattan, taken from wherever Victor had been when sleeplessness and worry had driven him to watch the dawn. Elena stared at the image, this small offering of beauty in the middle of crisis, and felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly. Not love, at least not the simple kind, but recognition. Recognition that Victor Romano was trying, in his complicated, imperfect way, to be better than he'd been. To show her a different version of himself. Whether that version could last, whether it was real or just performance, she didn't know yet. But she was beginning to think she wanted to find out. The warehouse fire turned out to be just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, 3 more of Victor's properties were targeted. A shipping container yard in Newark, a construction site in Queens, and a restaurant in Little Italy that had been in the Romano family for 3 generations. The attacks were coordinated, professional, designed to send a message that someone was willing to go to war. Elena watched it unfold from the relative safety of the Park Slope townhouse, seeing the strain build in Victor's face each time he visited, hearing it in his voice during their nightly phone calls. He was sleeping less, working more, the careful progress they'd been making in therapy starting to fray under the pressure of maintaining his empire while someone actively tried to dismantle it. It's Volkov, he told her during one late-night visit, accepting the tea she'd made him but not drinking it, just holding the cup like he needed something to do with his hands. We have evidence now. He's trying to force me to accept his terms by bleeding me dry, making me desperate enough to agree to anything. Elena sat across from him in the living room, 32 weeks pregnant now, her belly enormous and the twins so active she could see their movements through her shirt. What are you going to do? End it. His voice was flat, emotionless in that way that meant he was feeling too much and locking it all down. There are ways to handle situations like this, permanent ways. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy and dark. Elena felt her heart rate spike, felt the babies respond to her stress with a flurry of kicks. You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about protecting what's mine. Victor finally looked at her, and his eyes were hard, the warmth she'd started to see in them over the past weeks completely absent. He's declared war, Elena. You don't win wars by being reasonable. You win them by not fighting them in the first place. She leaned forward, trying to catch his gaze, to find the man who'd been trying so hard to change underneath the ruthless crime boss who was taking over. Victor, if you do this, if you have him killed, there will be consequences. His people will retaliate. More violence, more danger. When does it end? It ends when I make it end. He set down the tea, standing abruptly. I didn't want to burden you with this. You're supposed to be resting, staying calm. Your blood pressure. My blood pressure is the least of my concerns right now. Elena struggled to her feet, refusing to have this conversation while he loomed over her. I'm concerned about you becoming the man I left again, the one who solves every problem with force and control. This isn't about control. This is about survival. It's always about survival with you. But Victor, at what cost? What kind of world are you creating for our daughters? One where violence is always the answer, where every conflict ends in bloodshed? His face darkened. I'm creating a world where they're safe, where no one dares touch them because they know what I'm capable of. You're creating a world where they grow up afraid, where they learn that love means dominance and protection means possession. Elena's voice cracked. I can't do this again. I can't watch you spiral into that darkness and pretend it's for my own good. Then don't watch. The words came out harsh, sharp enough to cut. I never asked you to be part of this side of my life. I've tried to keep you separate, to protect you from the ugly reality of what I do. But you keep pushing, keep demanding to understand, and now you're upset when you see the truth. The truth is that you're choosing violence when there are other options. You could walk away from the deal with Volkov. You could absorb the losses. I could show weakness and watch my entire organization crumble. Victor's voice rose, frustration and exhaustion bleeding through his control. You don't understand how this works, Elena. In my world, weakness is death. If I let Volkov get away with this, every other enemy I have will see an opening. They'll come after me, after my family, after you and our daughters. The only way to stop it is to make an example so brutal that no one ever tries this again. Elena felt tears burning in her eyes, felt the familiar suffocation of being told she didn't understand, that her concerns were naive, that Victor knew best. It was the same pattern as before, dressed up in different words but fundamentally unchanged. I can't be with someone who solves problems by killing people. Then it's good we're not together. The words were meant to hurt, and they did. Victor's expression was cold now, distant. We're co-parents, Elena. That's all. You don't get a vote in how I run my business. Your business affects our children, and I'm handling it the way I know how. He moved toward the door, done with the conversation, done with her objections. I'll send extra security. Until this situation is resolved, I don't want you leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. You don't get to tell me. I'm not telling you. I'm asking you. Please, Elena, just until this is over. Stay safe. Let me handle Volkov without worrying about you too. He left before she could respond, the door closing with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Elena stood in the living room, her hands on her belly, and felt the fragile peace they'd been building shatter like glass. She called Sarah, needing to hear a voice that wasn't tangled up in the Romano world. He's going to kill someone, she said without preamble when Sarah answered. There's this business rival, and Victor's going to have him killed, and I don't know what to do. Can you stop him? No, he made that very clear. I don't get a say in his business. Sarah was quiet for a moment. Elena, I'm going to say something you're not going to want to hear. You knew who Victor was when you got involved with him. You knew his family business wasn't legitimate. You can't expect him to suddenly become someone else just because you're having his children. I'm not asking him to become someone else. I'm asking him not to commit murder. In his world, that might be the same thing. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying you have to decide if you can accept the reality of who he is, not who you want him to be, who he actually is. After they hung up, Elena lay on the couch and stared at the ceiling, feeling her daughters move inside her and wondering what she'd done. She'd thought Victor could change, thought therapy and boundaries and honest communication could reshape him into someone who could exist in her world. But maybe Sarah was right. Maybe you couldn't separate Victor Romano from the violence that had made him, that sustained him, that defined him. The next morning, Dr. Chen made an emergency house call after Elena's home blood pressure monitor flagged concerning numbers. She took readings, checked the baby's heartbeats, and delivered the verdict Elena had been dreading. Bed rest. Immediately. Dr. Chen's voice left no room for argument. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. If it doesn't come down, we're looking at preeclampsia, possible early delivery. These babies need more time to develop. That means you need to rest. Complete rest. No stress, no excitement, nothing that elevates your heart rate. I'm 32 weeks. If they came now, they'd likely survive, but they'd face complications, lung development, feeding issues, possible long-term effects. Every week they stay inside is crucial. Dr. Chen packed up her equipment. I'm serious about the bed rest, Elena. Couch or bed, that's it. I'll arrange for a visiting nurse to check on you daily, and you need to tell Mr. Romano. He needs to understand how serious this is. Elena called Victor after Dr. Chen left, reaching his voicemail. It's me, I'm on bed rest. Doctor's orders. The babies need to stay in longer and my blood pressure is too high. I thought you should know. He called back within minutes. The ice from last night's argument completely gone from his voice, replaced by barely controlled panic. What happened? Are you okay? Are the babies? We're fine. For now. But I can't do anything that causes stress or elevates my heart rate. She paused, letting the implications sink in. That includes arguments about your business decisions. Silence. Then, I'm coming over. Victor, you don't have to. I'm coming over. Don't argue with me. It's bad for your blood pressure. 20 minutes later, he was at her door with Marco and another man she didn't recognize, both of them carrying equipment. This is David, Victor explained as they set up in her living room. He's a nurse, former Army medic. He's going to be staying here, monitoring you and the babies until they're born. I don't need a live-in nurse. Dr. Chen said you need daily monitoring. This is daily monitoring. Victor's tone was calm but absolute. David will have the guest room. He's trained in emergency childbirth, just in case. He's also trained in security protocols. 2 birds, 1 stone. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to assert her independence, but she was too tired and too scared. The truth was, having someone medically trained in the house did make her feel safer. And David seemed nice enough, professional and quiet, promising to stay out of her way unless she needed him. After Marco and David retreated to set up the monitoring equipment, Victor sat on the edge of the couch where Elena was propped up with pillows. I'm sorry, he said quietly. About last night. About putting you in a position where you had to worry about my decisions. Are you still going to do it? Kill Volkov? I'm going to handle the situation. He wouldn't meet her eyes. But I'm going to try to do it in a way that doesn't involve anyone dying. There are other options: financial pressure, legal complications, strategic partnerships that cut him out. I'm exploring all of them. Because I asked you to? Because you're right. He finally looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression was startling. I was falling back into old patterns, solving problems the way my uncle taught me to solve them, with force and fear. But that's not who I want to be anymore. Not for you, and especially not for them. His hand moved to her belly, resting gently on the curve where their daughters grew. Elena covered his hand with hers. I know this is hard for you. I know going against your instincts feels like weakness. But Victor, there's strength in restraint, in choosing the harder path because it's the right one. I'm trying to believe that. His thumb traced small circles on her belly. How are they? The babies? Active, especially at night. I think they're training for a career in kickboxing. She smiled slightly. Dr. Chen says they're healthy, just need more time to develop. Every day counts at this point. Then we'll get you every day possible. Victor stood, his expression shifting into problem-solving mode. I'm having meals delivered, prepared by a nutritionist who specializes in high-risk pregnancies. David will monitor your vitals 3 times a day. I've arranged for a massage therapist who's trained in prenatal care to come twice a week. It'll help with circulation and stress. And, Victor, stop. Elena held up a hand. This is you trying to control everything again. This is me trying to take care of you. It's both, and I need you to understand the difference. She softened her voice. I appreciate the help. I do, but I need to feel like I have some say in my own care. Can we compromise? You suggest things, and I decide which ones I want. He looked pained, but nodded. Okay. Yes, I can do that. Good. Then here's what I want. The nutritionist meals sound great. The massage therapist too. But I want to choose when David checks my vitals, not have it on a rigid schedule. And I want you to visit, but not hover. Does that work? That works. He pulled out his phone, making notes. I'll arrange everything. And Elena, thank you. For what? For still believing I can do this. Be better. He looked at her with such raw honesty that it made her chest ache. Half the time I don't believe it myself. But when you look at me like you're looking at me right now, like I'm worth the effort, it makes me want to try harder. Over the next week, they fell into a new routine. Elena spent her days on the couch or in bed, reading baby books and trying not to think about all the things she should be doing to prepare. David was a quiet, reassuring presence, checking her blood pressure and the baby's heartbeats without making it feel intrusive. Victor visited every evening, bringing dinner and staying to talk about everything except his ongoing war with Volkov. Their therapy sessions moved to video calls, Dr. Martinez conducting them from her office while Elena participated from the couch, and Victor called in from wherever his day had taken him. They worked on communication, on recognizing when old patterns were emerging, on finding ways to support each other that didn't involve control or withdrawal. I'm proud of both of you, Dr. Martinez said during their third virtual session. The progress you've made in such a short time is remarkable. Victor, you're learning to ask instead of demand. Elena, you're learning to express your needs before resentment builds. These are crucial skills for co-parenting. It doesn't always feel like progress, Elena admitted. Sometimes it feels like we're just barely keeping it together. That's because you are, Dr. Martinez said with a smile. Change is messy and hard and uncomfortable, but you're doing it. That's what matters. That night, Victor stayed later than usual, sitting in the armchair near the couch and just being present while Elena half-watched a movie on TV. Around 10, she felt a sharp pain across her abdomen, different from the normal aches and twinges. She gasped, her hand flying to her belly. Victor was on his feet instantly. What's wrong? I don't know. It hurt. It's probably nothing, just another pain, sharper this time, taking her breath away. David! Victor's voice carried through the house. The nurse appeared within seconds, his expression calm but focused. Describe the pain, David said, already pulling out his blood pressure cuff and fetal monitor. Sharp. Across my whole belly, comes and goes. Elena tried to breathe through the fear. It's too early. They can't come yet. David worked quickly, his hands gentle as he positioned the monitors. Your blood pressure is elevated. I'm picking up both heartbeats, strong and steady. The pain could be Braxton Hicks contractions, which are normal, but given your condition, I want to be safe. I'm calling Dr. Chen. The next hour was a blur of activity. Dr. Chen arrived, examined Elena, and confirmed what David had suspected. Early contractions, not labor yet, but a warning sign that needed to be taken seriously. We need to stop these contractions, she said. I'm going to admit you to the hospital. We'll give you medications to slow them down, monitor you closely. If we're lucky, we can buy you a few more weeks. And if we're not lucky? Victor's voice was tight with fear. Then we deliver early and deal with the complications. Dr. Chen's voice was kind but honest. But let's focus on the optimistic scenario. Elena's young and healthy. The babies are good sizes for their gestational age. We have excellent NICU facilities if needed. This is serious, but it's manageable. The ambulance ride to Mount Sinai felt surreal. Elena lying on the gurney while Victor held her hand and David relayed information to the EMTs. At the hospital, they were whisked into a private room. Machines and monitors appearing around her, nurses moving with efficient purpose. "I'm scared," Elena whispered to Victor while the medical team worked. "I know, me too." He pressed his lips to her knuckles, his hand trembling slightly. "But you're strong. They're strong. We're going to get through this." The medications worked. Over the next 6 hours, the contractions slowed and finally stopped. Elena's blood pressure stabilized. The crisis passed, leaving exhaustion and relief in its wake. Dr. Chen ordered Elena to stay in the hospital for observation, minimum 48 hours, possibly longer depending on how she responded. Victor refused to leave. He pulled strings, called in favors, made arrangements, until the hospital allowed him to stay in Elena's room despite visiting hours, setting up camp in the uncomfortable chair beside her bed. Marco brought him changes of clothes and his laptop. He conducted business from his phone, speaking in low tones while Elena drifted in and out of medication-induced sleep. On the second day, Elena woke to find Victor asleep in the chair, his head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck aching, his hand still holding hers even in sleep. He looked younger like this, vulnerable, the lines of stress and control smoothed away. She studied him, this complicated man who loved so fiercely and so destructively, and felt something shift in her heart. She'd spent so long being angry at him, afraid of him, fighting against what he represented. But looking at him now, keeping vigil beside her hospital bed, refusing to leave despite the empire that needed his attention, she saw something else. Saw the man he was trying to become, imperfect and struggling, but genuinely trying. Victor stirred, his eyes opening and immediately finding hers. "You're awake. How do you feel?" "Tired. Sore. But okay." She squeezed his hand. "You look terrible. When was the last time you slept more than an hour?" "I'm fine." "You're exhausted. Victor, you can't help me if you collapse." "I'm not leaving you." "I'm not asking you to leave. I'm asking you to take care of yourself." She gestured to the small couch against the wall. "Lie down. Actually sleep. I'll be here when you wake up." He looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. He moved to the couch, and within minutes his breathing evened out into real sleep. Elena watched him for a while, then turned her attention to the monitors beside her bed, watching the readouts of 2 tiny heartbeats, strong and steady. "Your father is trying," she whispered to her daughters. "He's difficult and controlling, and sometimes impossible, but he's trying. And maybe that's what love looks like sometimes. Not perfect, not easy, but genuine effort to be better." Dr. Chen visited that evening with good news. "Contractions have completely stopped. Blood pressure is stable. I think we're out of the woods for now. But Elena, you're staying on complete bed rest until delivery. No exceptions. And we're moving up the delivery date. I want to schedule a C-section for 37 weeks. That gives the babies time to develop while minimizing the risk of complications." "So 37 weeks is 5 weeks away," Elena said, doing the math. 5 weeks of bed rest. "I know it's hard, but it's necessary." Dr. Chen looked at Victor, who'd woken when she entered. "Mr. Romano, she's going to need help. Round-the-clock support. Can you arrange that?" "Already done." Victor's voice was hoarse from sleep. "Whatever she needs." They were discharged the next day with strict instructions and enough medications to stock a pharmacy. The ride home was quiet, Elena processing the reality that in 5 weeks, just 5 weeks, she would meet her daughters. The townhouse felt different when they arrived, both safer and more confining. Her world was narrowing to these rooms, this couch, this bed. Victor helped her get settled, moving around the space with surprising gentleness. "I'm staying tonight," he said, not asking. "I already cleared my schedule for tomorrow, too. I want to make sure you're okay before I go back to work." "What about Volkov? The situation?" "Being handled. I took your advice, found another way." He sat on the edge of the couch. "I reached out to some of his competitors, offered them information about his operations in exchange for them putting pressure on him financially. Legal pressure. Nothing violent. It's slower than my original plan, but it's working." He's backed off. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "You did that for me?" "I did it for us. For them." His hand moved to her belly. "You were right. I can't be the father I want to be if I'm the man who solves every problem with violence. I'm trying to be better. see that. I do. She covered his hand with hers. Victor, I want to try something. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to be completely honest. Okay. If I asked you to marry me again, not for show, not for legal protection, but because we wanted to build a real partnership, what would you say? Victor stared at her, shock written across his face. What? You heard me. Would you marry me? Not the way we did before, rushing into it because you wanted to claim me, but slowly, carefully, building something real together. Elena, is this the medication talking? No, this is me, completely clear-headed, asking you if you think we could make this work. Not just as co-parents, but as partners. As people who choose each other every day, not out of obligation or circumstance, but because we want to. He was quiet for a long time, his eyes searching hers. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I would say yes. I would say yes 1,000 times. But Elena, I don't want you to feel pressured. I don't want you to think you owe me this because I'm trying to change. I don't feel pressured. I feel hopeful. She smiled, tears sliding down her cheeks. I feel like maybe we could do this right this time. Not perfect, but real, honest, built on actual partnership instead of control. Then yes. Victor leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll spend every day trying to deserve you. I'll mess up and struggle and probably drive you crazy. But I'll never stop trying to be the man you need me to be. That's all I'm asking. Elena kissed him, soft and gentle, a promise and a beginning. We'll do it after the babies are born, when things are calmer, a small ceremony, just us and the people we love. Whatever you want, however you want it. His thumb brushed away her tears. I love you. I never stopped loving you, even when you left, even when I was furious and hurt and determined to find you. I loved you through all of it. I know, I loved you too. That's why it hurt so much. She pulled back slightly. But Victor, we need to be clear about something. If you fall back into old patterns, if you start trying to control me again, I will leave. I will take our daughters and I will leave, and this time I won't come back. Do you understand? I understand, and I won't let that happen. His voice was firm, absolute. I'm not the same man I was. I refuse to be. They sat together on the couch, planning a future that felt both impossible and inevitable, until Elena's exhaustion pulled her toward sleep. Victor helped her to bed, tucking her in with a tenderness that made her chest ache, and settled into the chair beside her to keep watch. As Elena drifted off, she felt her daughters moving inside her, these two lives that had brought her and Victor back together, that had forced them both to become better versions of themselves. In 5 weeks, everything would change again. But for now, in this quiet moment, Elena let herself believe in possibility. Believe that love could be rebuilt, that people could change, that two broken people could create something whole together. It was a fragile belief, but it was hers, and she held on to it with both hands as sleep claimed her, Victor's steady presence beside her, and 5 weeks of waiting stretching out before them like a promise. The 5 weeks passed in a strange suspension of time, each day blending into the next in a rhythm of bed rest and monitoring, of Victor's evening visits and Sarah's video calls, of feeling her daughters grow stronger inside her while the world outside continued its chaotic spin. Elena read every parenting book she could find, watched countless hours of terrible television, and learned to accept help without feeling like she was surrendering her independence. Victor kept his promise. He didn't hover, didn't try to control every aspect of her care, but he was present in ways that mattered. He brought her favorite foods, sat with her through the long afternoons, and talked about everything from baby names to the business he was slowly, deliberately reforming. The violence that had defined his world for so long was being replaced with strategy, with partnerships built on mutual benefit rather than fear. It wasn't a complete transformation. Victor Romano would never be a legitimate businessman in the traditional sense, but it was progress. Real, measurable progress. Their therapy sessions continued, Dr. Martinez helping them navigate the complicated terrain of rebuilding trust while preparing for parenthood. They practiced difficult conversations, learned to recognize each other's triggers, and slowly constructed a framework for their relationship that felt sustainable. Not perfect, but possible. "I want to ask you something," Elena said one evening when Victor was reading beside her on the couch, his hand resting absently on her belly where the babies kicked and rolled. They were 36 weeks now, just days away from the scheduled C-section, and Elena felt enormous, uncomfortable, and strangely peaceful all at once. "Anything," Victor said, setting down his book. "After we get married, after the dust settles and we figure out how to be parents, what do you want our life to look like? Not what you think I want to hear. What you actually want." Victor was quiet, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I want Sunday mornings," he said finally. "I want to wake up next to you and make breakfast while our daughters play in the garden. I want normal things, domestic things, the kind of life I never thought I could have." He paused. "But I also want to be honest. I can't walk away from the family business completely. It's not just what I do. It's who I am, how I was raised. The best I can offer is boundaries. Work stays at work. When I'm home, I'm present, completely present." "I can live with that." Elena laced her fingers through his. "As long as you mean it, as long as home is sacred." "It will be, I swear it." They were still sitting like that, connected and quiet, when Elena felt it, a sharp, unmistakable contraction that took her breath away. Different from the ones that had sent her to the hospital weeks ago, stronger, more purposeful. "Victor," she managed, "I think it's time." His eyes went wide. "But the C-section is scheduled for Thursday. It's only Tuesday. Tell that to your daughters." Another contraction hit, and Elena gripped his hand hard enough to hurt. "Call Dr. Chen, now." The next hours were a controlled chaos of movement and preparation. David appeared, calm and efficient, checking her vitals while Victor made frantic phone calls. Dr. Chen gave the order to come to the hospital immediately. The contractions were regular, progressing fast, and waiting was no longer an option. In the car, Elena tried to breathe through the pain while Victor sat beside her, his face pale but his voice steady as he talked her through each contraction. "You're doing great. Just breathe. We're almost there." "I'm scared," Elena admitted between contractions. "What if something goes wrong? What if—" "Nothing's going to go wrong." Victor's voice was absolute, brooking no argument. "You're strong. They're strong. We're going to meet our daughters tonight, and everything is going to be fine." At the hospital, they were rushed into pre-op, nurses and doctors moving around Elena with practiced efficiency. Dr. Chen appeared, already in scrubs, her expression focused but reassuring. "Everything looks good. Baby's heart rates are strong. Your vitals are stable. We're going to do this exactly as planned, just a little ahead of schedule." "Can he be there?" Elena asked, gesturing to Victor. "During the surgery?" "Of course, we'll get him suited up." Dr. Chen squeezed Elena's hand. "You ready to become a mother?" Elena nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. This was happening. After 9 months of fear and planning, of running and returning, of breaking and rebuilding, she was about to meet the two lives that had changed everything. The operating room was bright and cold, the surgical team moving with choreographed precision. Victor stood beside Elena's head, holding her hand, his eyes never leaving her face even as the doctors worked behind the blue surgical drape. She could feel pulling, pressure, strange sensations that her mind couldn't quite process through the epidural. Then, suddenly, a cry. High and outraged, the sound of a baby taking her first breath. "First one's here," Dr. Chen announced. 7 pounds, 2 ounces, perfect. Elena started crying before she even saw her, overwhelmed by the reality of that sound. Her daughter. Her first daughter, crying and alive and real. "She's beautiful," Victor whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Elena, she's perfect." Seconds later, another cry joined the first. "And baby too," Dr. Chen said. 6 pounds, 14 ounces, both girls healthy and strong. The nurses brought them over, wrapped in blankets, their tiny faces scrunched and red. Elena looked at them, these two impossibly small humans she and Victor had created, and felt her entire world reorganize around them. Nothing else mattered. Not the past, not the fear, not the complicated mess of her and Victor's relationship. Just these two perfect lives that were now hers to protect. "Do you want to hold them?" the nurse asked. Elena nodded, unable to speak. They placed the babies in her arms, one on each side, and she felt Victor's hand on her shoulder, felt him leaning close to see. "Hi," Elena whispered to her daughters. "Hi, babies. I'm your mom, and this is your dad. We're so happy you're here." Victor made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob, his free hand coming up to touch each tiny head with infinite gentleness. "They're so small," he said, wonder in his voice. "How are they so small and so perfect?" The surgical team finished their work, wheeling Elena to recovery with Victor walking alongside, refusing to let go of her hand. The babies were taken to the nursery for routine checks, and for a brief moment, Elena and Victor were alone in the recovery room, processing what had just happened. "We have daughters," Victor said, as if testing the words. "2 daughters." "We do." Elena felt exhausted and exhilarated, her body aching, but her heart so full it hurt. "What should we name them?" They discussed names endlessly over the past weeks, but never settled on anything definitive. Now, having seen their faces, having heard their cries, Elena felt like she finally knew. "The first one, the one who cried first, what about Isabella?" Elena suggested. "It means devoted, strong." "Isabella Romano." Victor tested it, then smiled. "I love it." "And the second?" "Sophia. It means wisdom. I want them to be wiser than we were, to make better choices." "Isabella and Sophia." Victor leaned down and kissed Elena's forehead. Perfect names for perfect girls. When the babies were brought back, clean and swaddled and sleeping peacefully, the nurse showed Elena how to nurse them, helping her navigate the awkward coordination of feeding twins. Victor watched, completely absorbed, asking questions and taking mental notes like this was the most important business meeting of his life. "You're going to be a good father," Elena said softly, watching him watch their daughters. "I'm going to try." He looked up at her, and there were tears in his eyes. "I never thought I'd have this. A family. Love that wasn't complicated by power and control. When you left, when I thought I'd lost you forever, I convinced myself I didn't deserve it anyway. That men like me don't get happy endings. Maybe this isn't an ending. Maybe it's just a beginning." Elena shifted carefully, mindful of her incision. A complicated, messy, beautiful beginning. The first night in the hospital was a blur of feeding schedules and diaper changes, of learning to recognize which baby was which by the subtle differences in their features. Isabella had Victor's dark eyes and a tendency to cry louder when she was hungry. Sophia was quieter, more observant, with Elena's nose and a surprisingly calm temperament for a newborn. Victor refused to leave, sleeping in fits and starts in the chair beside Elena's bed, jumping up every time one of the babies made a sound. Watching him, this powerful, dangerous man reduced to nervous excitement by 2 tiny girls, Elena felt something inside her soften completely. He was trying so hard, not just to be a good father, but to be the man she needed him to be, the man he wanted to be. Sarah visited the next morning, bringing flowers and an overwhelming amount of pink baby clothes, her eyes welling up the moment she saw the twins. "They're beautiful," she said, holding Sophia with practiced ease. "They look like both of you. How are you feeling?" "Sore, tired, happy." Elena adjusted Isabella in her arms. "I can't believe they're real. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up, and this will all be a dream." "It's real." Sarah looked at Victor, who'd stepped out to take a phone call. "How's he doing?" "Better than I expected. He's completely in love with them already." Elena smiled. "I've never seen him like this. So gentle, so unsure of himself." "That's what babies do. They humble you." Sarah handed Sophia back carefully. "So, are you going to tell me about this remarriage plan?" Because Victor mentioned it to Marco, who mentioned it to someone, and now there's apparently speculation among his entire organization about when the wedding is. Elena laughed. "We haven't set a date. We're taking it slow, making sure we can actually do this before we make it official." "Smart." Sarah settled into the visitor's chair. "For what it's worth, I think you're both different than you were before. Not completely different. You're still you, and he's still him, but different enough that maybe it could work this time. They spent the next hour talking about everything and nothing, Sarah helping with the babies while Elena rested, and for a little while it felt almost normal, like she was just another new mother navigating the overwhelming chaos of twins, not a woman caught between two worlds, trying to build a life with a man most people would run from. Victor returned looking energized, carrying coffee for everyone. Marco's handling things at the office. I'm taking 2 weeks off, completely off, no exceptions. Victor Romano taking vacation? Sarah raised an eyebrow. I never thought I'd see the day. Neither did I. He sat on the edge of Elena's bed, careful not to jostle her. But some things are more important than business. I'm not missing these first weeks with my daughters. They were discharged 3 days later with enough instructions and equipment to stock a small medical facility. The drive home was terrifyingly slow, Victor treating every bump in the road like a personal assault, constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure the babies were okay in their car seats. They're fine, Elena said for the 10th time. You're going to give yourself a heart attack. I'm being careful. You're going 15 miles an hour in a 35 zone. That's not careful, that's paranoid. But she understood. The weight of responsibility was overwhelming. The knowledge that these two tiny lives depended on them completely. Every decision felt monumental. Every sound the babies made sent spikes of anxiety through both of them. At the townhouse, they worked together to get the babies settled, falling into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Victor changed diapers with intense concentration, following the techniques the nurses had taught him like they were battle plans. Elena nursed while he prepared bottles for supplementation. They took shifts through the night, stumbling through the darkness to answer cries, learning to function on fragments of sleep. It was exhausting. It was beautiful. It was everything Elena had been afraid of and everything she'd hoped for. On the 4th night home, Elena woke at 3 a.m. to find Victor's side of the bed empty. She checked the nursery and found him there, standing between the cribs, just watching Isabella and Sophia sleep. His face was soft in the dim glow of the nightlight, all his usual hardness completely absent. Can't sleep? Elena asked quietly from the doorway. Victor turned, smiling slightly. I keep thinking they're going to disappear, that this is too good to be real. They're real. We're real. Elena crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his waist from behind. This is your life now, Victor. Our life. I don't deserve it. His voice was barely a whisper. I don't deserve you or them or any of this. The things I've done, the person I've been. Stop. Elena moved around to face him. You're not that person anymore. Or maybe you are, but you're also this person. The one who takes 2-week vacations to be with his daughters. The one who changes diapers at 3 a.m. The one who's trying every single day to be better. That's the Victor I'm choosing. That's the father they're going to know. He pulled her close, careful of her still healing incision, and held her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. Marry me, he said into her hair. Not someday. Soon. I want to make this official. I want to stand up in front of everyone and promise to be the man you need me to be. We said we'd wait. Take it slow. I know what we said. But Elena, I've never been more sure of anything. These past weeks, watching you become a mother, building this life together. I don't want to wait. I don't want to spend another day not being married to you. Elena pulled back to look at him. In the dim light, she could see the truth in his eyes, the absolute certainty. And she felt it too, that pull toward permanence, toward making promises that couldn't be easily broken. Okay, she said. Yes, let's do it. They planned the wedding for 2 weeks later, a small ceremony in the townhouse garden with just Sarah, Catherine Wright, Marco, and a handful of Victor's family members who'd proven themselves trustworthy. No spectacle, no performance, just honesty and commitment and a chance to start fresh. The morning of the wedding, Elena stood in her bedroom and looked at herself in the mirror. She'd lost most of the pregnancy weight, but her body was still different, marked by the experience of carrying and delivering twins. The dress she'd chosen was simple, ivory instead of white, flowing in a way that made her feel beautiful without trying too hard. Sarah helped her with her hair, weaving flowers into the simple updo. You're sure about this? Sarah asked. It's not too late to back out if you have doubts. I don't have doubts. Or maybe I do, but I also have certainty. Does that make sense? Elena turned to face her friend. I know Victor isn't perfect. I know he's going to struggle with his instincts to control things. But I also know he loves me, really loves me, and he loves our daughters. That's worth fighting for. Then I'm happy for you. Sarah hugged her carefully. You deserve this. Both of you deserve a chance to get it right. Downstairs, the garden had been transformed. White chairs arranged in short rows, flowers everywhere, soft music playing from hidden speakers. Isabella and Sophia were with a nurse in the house, both sleeping peacefully in their matching pink dresses, too young to understand what was happening, but present nonetheless. Victor stood near the makeshift altar with Marco beside him, looking nervous and hopeful in a dark suit. When he saw Elena, his expression transformed, pure joy and wonder and love so intense it made her breath catch. The ceremony was short, officiated by a judge Catherine had recommended. They'd written their own vows, promises that acknowledged their past while committing to their future. I promise to listen, Victor said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. To value your voice, your choices, your autonomy. I promise to love you without trying to possess you, to protect you without imprisoning you, to be your partner, not your keeper. He paused, swallowing hard. And I promise to fail sometimes, because I'm human and flawed. But I also promise to keep trying, every single day, for as long as you'll have me. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. I promise to trust you, she said. To believe in your ability to change, to grow. I promise to tell you when I'm scared instead of running, to fight for us instead of against you. She smiled through the tears. I promise to remember that love isn't about perfection. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. They exchanged rings, simple bands that felt weighted with meaning. And when the judge pronounced them married, Victor kissed her with a tenderness that made the small gathering of witnesses collectively sigh. The reception was equally simple. Champagne and cake in the garden, toasts from Sarah and Marco that were heartfelt and slightly embarrassing. Catherine gave a brief speech about the legal significance of marriage and their custody arrangement, making everyone laugh when she ended with, "And now you two can stop making my job so complicated." As the sun set and their guests mingled, Victor pulled Elena aside to the quiet corner of the garden where the roses grew wild against the back fence. "Thank you," he said, holding both her hands. "For what?" "For giving me another chance, for believing I could be better, for bringing our daughters into the world and making me a father." He touched her face gently. "For not giving up on me even when I'd given up on myself." "We saved each other," Elena said simply. "You showed me I could be strong enough to demand what I needed. I showed you that love doesn't have to be controlling to be real. We're better together than we were apart." A cry from the house interrupted them. Isabella, probably, with her impressive lung capacity. They walked back together, hand in hand, and found the babies awake and demanding attention. Victor picked up Isabella while Elena took Sophia, and they stood there in the garden surrounded by their small circle of loved ones, holding their daughters and each other, and felt the weight of everything they'd been through and everything they'd become. "This is it," Elena said softly, looking around at the scene. "This is the life we built." "It's better than anything I imagined," Victor replied. And for the first time since Elena had known him, he looked completely at peace. The months that followed were an adjustment, learning to navigate parenthood and marriage simultaneously. Victor kept his promise about boundaries, keeping work separate from home, being present when he was with them. Elena learned to trust that presence, to believe that he really had changed in fundamental ways. They had fights, of course, disagreements about discipline strategies, about security protocols around the babies, about 1,000 small things that felt monumental in the moment. But they also had Dr. Martinez, who helped them work through conflicts before they became crises. They had their commitment to honesty, to saying the hard things before resentment could build. They had the memory of what they'd almost lost, keeping them humble and grateful. Isabella and Sophia grew fast, hitting milestones that made Elena's heart ache with how quickly time was passing. Their first smiles, their first laughs, the way they seemed to recognize their parents' voices. Victor was completely smitten, spending hours just watching them play, marveling at every tiny achievement. On their daughter's first birthday, they threw a small party in the same garden where they'd gotten married. Sarah brought an enormous cake. Marco arrived with gifts that were far too expensive for one-year-olds to appreciate. Catherine came with her wife and regaled everyone with stories of the legal gymnastics required to protect the Romano family's interests. As the party wound down and the babies napped in their stroller, Elena and Victor sat together on the garden bench, watching the late afternoon sun paint everything gold. "Are you happy?" Victor asked. It was a question he had asked often in the past year, still seeking reassurance that she was choosing to stay, that this was what she wanted. "I'm happy," Elena confirmed. And it was true. Not the simple, uncomplicated happiness of fairy tales, but something richer and more real. The happiness of building something meaningful with someone who understood her completely, of watching her daughters grow in a home filled with love and laughter, of having fought for this life and won. "I never imagined this," Victor said, echoing her thoughts. "A year ago, I was alone, running an empire built on fear, convinced that was all I'd ever have. Now I have you. I have them. I have a family." "You have a choice," Elena corrected gently. "Every day you choose to be this person instead of the person you were. That's what makes it real." "I'll keep choosing it?" He pulled her close. "Every day. For the rest of my life." Inside the house, Isabella started crying, quickly joined by Sophia. The synchronized wake-up that Elena and Victor had learned to recognize. They stood together, moving toward the sound with the practiced ease of parents who'd learned to function on minimal sleep and maximum love. This was their life now. Not perfect, not simple, but wholly, completely theirs. Built on honesty and hard work, on forgiveness and faith, on the belief that people could change if they wanted it badly enough. As Elena lifted Isabella and Victor picked up Sophia, as they soothed their daughters and smiled at each other over their small, dark heads, Elena felt the last piece of her fear dissolve. This was real. This was lasting. This was the family they'd built from the wreckage of their first attempt. Stronger and truer because of everything they'd survived. "I love you," she said to Victor, the words as easy as breathing now. "I love you too," he replied. "All three of you. More than I knew it was possible to love anything." And in that moment, surrounded by the chaos and joy of their daughters, standing in the garden where they'd made their promises, Elena and Victor Romano weren't a crime boss and his escaped wife anymore. They were just parents, just partners, just two people who'd found their way back to each other and built something beautiful from the broken pieces. The past would always be part of their story, but it didn't define their future. Not anymore. They had chosen love, chosen family, chosen each other. And that choice, made new each day, was enough to build a lifetime on.